Good evening. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission for the Municipality of Anchorage. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Dean? Here. Mr. Ferguson?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Spring?
Here.
Mr. Strike?
Here.
Ms. Barker?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Sporhays?
Here.
Mr. Kange?
Here.
Thank you.
Anyone have any comments or changes to the minutes for Monday, April 6th?
Move to approve.
Okay. Can I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any objection? Any objection at all? Seeing and hearing no objection, the minutes are approved as submitted. Thank you very much. Ms. Barker, will you please do the disclosures?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do members have anything to disclose? Mr. Kange?
Thank you. Through the chair, in case D1B, I was not present. That's Resolution 2015-019 on the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Any other disclosures?
No one else. I have the same disclosure as Mr. Kange. Commissioner Kange, I was absent at the same meeting also, so I will not be voting on that portion. Mr. Sporhees?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to disclose that I was absent for that meeting as well. I will not be voting.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got enough to conduct business with all three of us gone, so that will work out fine. Mr. Spring, would you please handle the consent agenda?
Yes. Point of order first. I was out of town for a couple weeks, and I got my packet. Did I miss a resolution in my packet, or was that delivered sometime else? The resolution 2015-019? Was it in our packet? I didn't see it.
I believe it was on the table here.
Oh, it's on the table? Okay.
Is that right?
Okay, I see it. Okay. I'll entertain a motion then for the consent agenda approval.
Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda? Might be the better way to put it. Seeing and hearing.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I was not able to finish disclosures.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The first case, D1A 2015-015, I also was not at that meeting.
Okay.
I don't know if that creates any issues.
I think Dean is out on case 2015-006. Kange, Walker, and Ferguson are out on 2014-0185. Why don't we handle those separately so we can get it straight? Mr. Spring, would you make a motion to approve case 2015-015, and then we'll do the same thing on 2015-019?
Okay, I move to approve resolution 2015-015.
I have a second by Commissioner Kange. Any objection? Any objection at all? Seeing and hearing none, that is approved. Now, will we do the same thing on 2014-0185?
Yes,
Except, will depend on the clerk to get the right people voting on that one.
I move to approve resolution 2015-019.
Okay? Which is case number 2014-0185. We have a second by Mr. Robinson. Any objection? Any objection at all? That's approved also.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion to change the agenda.
Please go ahead.
There's an appearance request, which we always place last. Michelle Brown requested to talk about Anchorage housing situation, and I move that up behind the consent agenda.
Thank you very much. We have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any objection to reordering the agenda as described by Commissioner Spring? Seeing and hearing none, the agenda is reordered. That puts Ms. Brown up now.
Thank you. Members of the Commission, I'm Michelle Brown with United Way of Anchorage, and I'm here to chat with you a little tonight, and I appreciate this opportunity, about housing Anchorage. We've been having this discussion with a number of groups through town, and it made very good sense to come and touch base briefly with you. As you all probably are well aware, the results of a housing market analysis 3 years ago indicated that Anchorage needed 20,000 net new units to meet housing need by 2030, needed 18,000 of those units to be in the Anchorage Bowl. Recent production rates, however, are only about a third of what we're going to need to reach that rate. The reasons for this are many and complex, but it is having already a profound effect on our community. Housing Anchorage is a public-private nonprofit partnership. It's a coalition of organizations that came together because the shortage of available and affordable housing has been an escalating and persistent barrier in our community to business growth, family financial stability, and quality of life. And Mr. Robinson and his organization are very active participants in Housing Anchorage. The group decided to come together to first assess how big an issue is this, then what's causing it, and most importantly, what can we do about it. And we committed to data driving the process. We wanted to be completely data bound, and believe me, we have collected a massive amount. And I will not share all of that with you tonight. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of what we learned about housing availability, affordability, and the future expected need, and be happy to share more detailed information at any time you would like it. So first, on availability, recent surveys are very clear. Anchorage is feeling a pinch on housing. 48% of the residents polled said that there was not good availability of housing for either rent or for sale. 57% of employers who were surveyed in the most recent AEDC Business Confidence Index said that the current housing market in Anchorage was affecting their ability to recruit and retain employees. Since 2010, Anchorage's rental vacancy has dipped significantly below the 5% rate that is considered a healthy supply. We also have a shortage of homes for sale, particularly in the median range and below. The inventory for all homes for sale in Anchorage in May was the lowest in 30 years. In sum, there is a shortage of housing available along the entire housing spectrum. That means housing that's wholly subsidized all the way to wholly market-based housing, from multifamily through single family. The only exception to that is the very high-end priced houses. On affordability, we've seen a significant upward shift in the cost of all sizes of rentals since 2008. To be considered affordable, housing costs should not exceed 30% of a household's gross income. In 2014, it took over $1,300 a month to rent a two-bedroom apartment. That means a family needs an income of $52,000. We've also seen the price for an average price for a home, single-family home, rise to $360,000 in 2014. That requires a family income of $88,000. Half of Anchorage residents now are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. 1 in 5 Anchorage households is spending more than 50%. That's a serious red flag for a family, and it's also a serious red flag for our economy because these families have obviously less disposable income to spend on goods and services. Wages have not kept up with housing costs, and only 7 out of the 25 most common jobs in Anchorage right now can comfortably afford current rental rates. There's a fact sheet that I think is in your packets that have some more of this information. In short, affordability in Anchorage has now become a pervasive problem, and it affects far more than the homeless population and even folks with low incomes. It's affecting a lot of our workforce. So the last question is, what are we going to need in the future? While our population growth rate has remained relatively constant over the year, our demographics have shifted considerably. In 1960, most Anchorage households were couples with children under 18. Today, that's less than a quarter of Anchorage households. Our fastest growing segment of the population is seniors. Our second fastest is millennials. These smaller households want a different type of housing than people wanted in 1960. With these demographic changes, we're also seeing more people who want to rent, and that is expected to continue to rise over the next decade. So you would think that rising rents and sale prices and growing population would spur development. But that's not what's happening, even in these times of relatively low interest. Development has been stymied because the high costs of development and construction have led to a developer setting a price that people cannot afford. This disparity has led to a significant slowdown in production in Anchorage. This housing shortage is particularly acute for multifamily rental housing, and that is what the developers tell us is the hardest to pencil out with current costs to be affordable to what people can pay in this town. Most of the multifamily units that are being built today are tax credit projects, and there is not nearly enough of them to meet even current, let alone expected demand. This production slowdown, the housing costs increase, and the housing costs outpacing wages has led to what we call housing gridlock. People are not moving in the normal way you do in a healthy market. You move up as you have more income, and then as you start downsizing, you move down. What's happening is people aren't able to take that next step, and they're not moving. And the end result is, if you're worried about homelessness, for instance, they have no place to go. There aren't any entry ones. So what are we going to do about this? Again, Housing Anchorage is working with a number of groups that are very aggressively looking at solutions. Groups such as AEDC's, Live, Work, Play Housing Work Group, and the Assembly is certainly looking at it. They're looking for ways to invest in infrastructure that promote housing development, looking at incentives to encourage rehabilitation and new development, looking at innovative ways to finance, and also looking to ways to streamline the permitting process. So it's certain that we need to join together and think about our mindset in this community about really aggressively and proactively seeking more housing development and rehabilitation, and knowing that it's going to take a lot of multiple strategies working together. So that's the broad overview. I just wanted to make sure you were all familiar with it, and we really look forward to working with you as these solutions come up for public debate.
Hang there. We do have at least one question. We have more questions. Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, I do have one comment regarding the DOT. They have taken out a tremendous amount of housing in this town in the recent 2 years. The Sourdough Motel was housing units for 12 or 13 families. That is gone. The 92nd between Old Seward all the way to Abbott is going to have an interchange. On the east side of the street, I believe over 18 trailers are taken away instead of the empty vacant land to the north. Instead, they're going to the south and taking out 18 trailers. Those are going to be very difficult for those people to replace. Mm-hmm. On the west side, they initially told us there would only be one row of houses removed. Instead, they have taken out 3 blocks of houses. So it's very interesting how much they have randomly taken a tremendous amount of housing just right there, not to mention Hyder issue with the H2H project, that has tied up all that housing that nothing can be virtually done with any of that property. So the DOT, I don't know if you guys are in contact with the governor on this issue, but the DOT has really taken away a tremendous amount of housing, and I don't know why, in some cases, in the Sourdough Motel, are we ever going to do the bridge? But we've taken away all those homes. Yeah. So
Thank you.
anyway, just a thought, you might want to connect with the governor on that.
Thank you. We will explore that.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Ms. Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned you look forward to working with this body. How do you see that happening? What do you see as our relationship?
I'd really like to engage in discussion with you on what that might be. One of the things that we've talked about is we need a proactive plan that looks at how we actually spur production, because one of the interesting things our research showed us, many cities have an affordability problem. We have an affordability problem, but we also have a production problem, and we need to look very carefully at all of our systems and whether they are promoting the kind of housing redevelopment or new development that we need to have. And so that, your role in the comprehensive plan and your decision making on individual basis can have an impact on that. So I'd love to have, I don't know if it's a work session or some way we can talk about how do we work together on this within your authority. What would be the right issues to bring to you?
Would you be open to having representation from this body in your working group?
Sure, we would explore that. Be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You done, Ms. Parker? Mr. Sporhees?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Brown. Was Commissioner Dean's comments that kind of got me thinking when she mentioned, what was the hotel and the motel?
Sourdough.
The Sourdough Motel and redevelopment. As we see things kind of come to market, say like deferred properties like the Mush Inn or something like that, would that be projects that you guys would be interested in? And
We're interested in more of a comprehensive plan, but there are members of the coalition that I'm sure would be interested in looking at specific projects. Because, to come up to the whole net new units we need, we're going to have to look at a whole lot of different strategies.
so you're looking at pretty much any options at this time to help meet the demand, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
You finished? Mr. Spring?
Yes, thanks for coming to talk with us. We've heard a number of even an appearance request lately regarding the impact of the zoning code on multifamily housing, in particular what the impact of the new Title 21 when it comes into effect is going to have with all the design criteria that it contains. Has your group discussed that, and do you have an opinion regarding the impact of zoning on the affordability and penciling out of multifamily housing?
Certainly zoning is a major factor in a comprehensive plan to encourage new development and redevelopment. I know that the group that's working under the AEDC Live, Work, Play umbrella has been looking specifically at a number of issues around Title 21. So I'm sure that there are a list of things that we would be happy to share with you, or they'd be happy to come and discuss with you in that work session.
I have no further questions. We thank you very much for participating. I've got a question for the audience. How many in the audience, just by a show of hands, feel that we have a shortage of available housing? I would say you're 75, 80% on this informal poll. Thank you very much, Ms. Brown.
Thank you.
I would like to also point out that we have postponed the UMed district plan tonight. So if you're here to talk or to give testimony on the UMed district plan, that has been postponed. And I don't believe, Ms. McConnell? Ms. McConnell? Do we have a date on the UMed plan?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, so I don't want you sitting here waiting for something that's not going to happen on that, but the UMed plan has been postponed. The next item is case 2015-0016, a context-sensitive solutions transportation project site plan review for the Glen Highway capacity. This is not a public hearing. This is just a site plan review. Okay, I will. Yeah, yeah. Just hang tight for 1 minute, please. Mr. Robinson?
I'd like to move that we postpone indefinitely cases 2014-0204 and case 2015-0036.
I need a second, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Kange. Any objection? Any objection at all? Those two cases are postponed indefinitely. Okay. Who's going to speak? Would you?
I'm Brian Schumacher. That's SCHUMACHER. I'm the project manager with the Department of Transportation. I'm not the guy that takes the right of way. I work in construction. I have with me Barry Fitzgerald. He's with Kiewit. And Paul Witt. He's with HDR. I want to thank you for having us here tonight. We'd like to talk about the Glen Highway Capacity Improvements Design Build Project, the project that's currently in construction on the Glen Highway between Highland and Artillery. On the screen shows a diagram of what our concept is. I don't know if you can see it, but the thin orange line is the existing alignment. The thick gray lines are the conceptual planned alignment. We're taking the third lane that currently terminates at Highland, and we're pushing it through past Eagle River, past Artillery, and halfway to North Eagle River Interchange. It's the third lane is for capacity improvements, not an HOV lane. We do have the ability to add an HOV if later it's required.
Fourth lane.
The fourth lane would be the HOV. It'd go right down the median. The existing grade right there on the alignment is about 6%. Our concept is going to bring it down to about a 4% grade. So it goes from a rolling rural to a urban, rolling urban, I guess. It's pretty significant, 2%. Yeah, the DOT is the owner. Like I said, we advertised it about a year ago. We awarded it to Kiewit. Kiewit's partner and designer is Hanson Professional Services. Their quality firm is R&M Consultants, and HDR is providing the department technical assistance during the construction and design of the project. We currently have about $42.5 million of bond money to pay for the project. It was part of the 2012 ballot measure, November 2012 ballot measure. Now, Paul Witt's going to speak a little bit about the design build process.
This process is a little bit different, you see, because it's design build. It's not the normal plans in hand type review. We basically went out, did a conceptual plan, had performance prescriptive requirements. It's generally a quicker type of delivery method, and it also brings the contractor and the designer together. That Kiewit was hired along with the design firm of Hanson. As you see on this diagram, DOT is the owner. The design build contract went to Kiewit, and then they have their designer and contractor. HDR has assisted them with the procurement throughout the project, and we're also helping them manage the design and construction. What's different here is why we're under construction and you're reviewing this is that we got the 60% plans in when we talked to the planning staff of the city. That looked like the best time to bring in a review. We're still into construction and, of course, design. And this just, I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly. We thought we were going to talk a little bit longer. But basically, they designed the original grading around the bridges, the foundations of the bridges, while they're doing the later stages of the design and construction. That way you can really move a lot more quickly. There are risks in the project, but it has the possibility of saving both time and money. And so far, we've set it's a very tight budget on the project of $42.5 million, and part of the selection criteria is how much and how many betterments the contractor designer can come up with for that amount of money. And we're going to just touch on some of those things briefly. And basically, as part of the performance requirements and in the conceptual plan, the Kiewit basically took and came with a modified design. We've met all the planning and design requirements. Some of the things are we looked at the noise analysis, MS4 compliance, bicycle pathway connectivity, recreational river use, scenic byways, artwork. We have some on retaining walls, and we've also worked with the Eagle River traffic mitigation study. We worked hand in hand with them to make sure while our project is going forward, it accommodates that as well as future projects on the Glen Highway. As Brian was mentioning, this is actually a two-stage project. Right now we're doing the northbound lanes, but we're designing the north and the southbound. We would hope that possibly could have added the southbound on, but because of the fiscal crunch in the state there, that's going to be put off into the future. But at the end of the project, to make sure everything works, we will have north and southbound plans. Throughout the process, we've been meeting with various community groups. We've met with all the agencies. Since we're in construction, we basically have all the permits now, but we've had open houses, we've had online open houses, and in your packet you can take a look at that further if you'd like. Basically, this is a high-speed, limited-access highway. So we have a fairly large highway section, and it's the DOT's intent to improve safety on this corridor, and also they have programs all along the Glen Highway to basically have low-type vegetation along the highways, and basically so it's not attractive to moose and what other animals might be there. Also, from a visibility standpoint, that studies have shown that you really reduce accidents by giving drivers a clearer vision of the moose that may be there. That's the same reason there's a intent by the DOT to place lighting all the way on the Glen Highway, basically between the Palmer Hay Flats and Anchorage, and that's ongoing. So the highway right through here is lighted, and the new section will be lighted as well. Some of the other enhancements, and one of the reasons that Kiewit was awarded is they're enhancing the environment. One of the things that wasn't required, but they're going to do, and they're going to be improving the Fisk Passage on Meadow Creek, which is parallel to the highway just on the east part of the project. And it was basically worth the project team through the Corps of Engineers calculations, $500,000 worth of wetland credit, and basically balanced out whatever piers we have in the water in Eagle River and other fairly minor impacts. The whole project is, the main part of it's built between the existing DOT north and southbound, and this is not an interchange project. That would have to happen in the future, but we're to accommodate the additional capacity in lanes. There will be some minor interchange work. In addition, as part of the ramps on this job, north of the Artillery Road interchange, there will be another lane added as acceleration lane going to the north. And I'm going to turn this over to Barry. He's going to talk a little bit about the actual construction and the plans. We've gone through a Muni review on this set of plans, and we plan to address all those. One of the bigger misunderstandings in the plans that the Muni got, if you had been reading about the naming of roads and signs, the plans actually went in before we had the information from the Muni as to how they wanted the roads named. And we actually are meeting with the addressing of people with our revised plans to make sure everything is in line with what they want in this week.
Thanks, Paul. I'll give you guys a quick overview of some of the specifics of the project. Here you'll see in the bottom is a plan view of both the bridges and the future build-out condition. So we're currently building the one on the bottom of that plan view on the bottom picture there. That's the northbound bridge. The one on the top there shows the future southbound bridge that'll be built in phase 2 sometime in the future. The picture on the top there is a profile view, an elevation view that it shows kind of the layout of the bridge. It's a 4-span bridge, drilled shafts, 6-foot concrete columns, pier caps, pile founded abutments. This shows the location of the river in the bottom, the 100-year storm event. Just a second before you go there. The last one there is the one on the top right. Is it shows a cross section of the bridge with those top 2 girders on the left. Those are actually the bridge is built to accommodate the 2 additional girders that would be necessary in the future in the 30-year time study or farther out when the HOV was necessary. So those girders won't be installed, but it's ready for them if and when they're necessary. So this is just a little bit fancier picture of the same thing, kind of shows a rendering of what it looks like and what it'll look like on the bottom left after the construction is complete, showing the 100-year storm event. That'd be the water about as high as it gets in that area, and showing the drilled shafts and columns. So those are 50 to 60-foot drilled shafts and concrete columns there. So the bike path, here we maintain most of the existing bike path where it is. There are a few minor modifications. The biggest thing is because the new northbound takes the new alignment, the bike path stays on the existing alignment, which will reduce some of the potential impact or interactions between pedestrians and highway traffic.
You might add in that the existing highway will become a frontage road.
We're going to ask that you wrap up fairly quickly. We have some questions we want to get addressed.
I'll move a little faster. This is just a picture of the frontage road, how Hesperberg will tie in as the new frontage road goes. This is where the existing alignment ties into existing VFW near In Eagle River as the new alignment goes through. Here's a picture of this is what the wall art's going to look like, very similar to what it looks like up at the Glen Parks interchange. So this will be steel art mounted to concrete faced MSE wall. Some current pictures of construction here. We've got columns in the air, the trestles temporarily across the river, getting ready for cap work. Here's the new alignment between here, southbound's on your right, and northbound, the existing northbound's on your left. Temporary work across the river. We actually have steel up for a cap here, and I'll let Brian.
This is a comparison of what we anticipate and what's actually happening. They're pretty close together. The only difference is our anticipated completion date was in October 2016. It's currently this year, the end of this year, so we're moving along pretty good. And like Paul mentioned earlier, we're also having a phase 2 that's going to take care of the southbound alignment. That's what we got. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have some questions. Ms. Barker, do you want to start?
At the beginning of your presentation, you, I think, started to explain this, but somehow I think it wasn't fully developed, and that is, why are you coming to us now with a project that's close to half finished for context-sensitive design review?
Well, the answer to that question is it's a design-build project. We're following the department's design review process, and in that process, we are to submit our design phases to the Muni for review. Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, what I was trying to explain is it doesn't fit into the normal design process. We have the set of plans, the complete set of plans at a...
Pardon me for a minute. Do you think you're the only design-build project that has ever come before this group? Do you think you're the only design-build project that has come before this group?
I've presented years ago to this group, but I wasn't sure what you remembered about the project.
But I mean, just the point is, I think I've got 9 commissioners that are wondering why a project that's roughly 5 months from completion is now before this group. Brian, are you aware there's a memorandum of understanding between the Department of Transportation and the MOA?
Yes, I am, and that's what we're following. We're at 60. We've just gotten to 90% on our design, so we're just about to turn that into the muni.
What percentage done are you with your construction?
Oh, say.
Right, Barry, what percentage are you done?
About 38% of our.
Okay, but you're going to be done with it into this year
Correct.
on that one. Ms. Parker, do you have anything else?
Not at this time. I'll let others speak.
Mr. Spring?
Yes, looks like the termini of the project, is that the right word, ends at north of Artillery Road, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you really aren't making any changes to the bike path. There is a gap, of course, in the bike path south of Artillery Road and north of Artillery Road. And I don't see any reference to the bike plan's recommendation that gap be filled in. Design study reports or concept reports usually address issues like that. I don't see that issue's been addressed.
That's a good point. And our original scope of work and what our budget was, we didn't have funds to address that. Right now, we're identifying through the design build process if we have savings to look at that. And we've asked the contractor for some concepts, but that wasn't in our original scope as what we had from the legislature.
Yeah, that's frustrating, I guess. And it's a difficult problem. I mean, I don't know what the solution is. Maybe there isn't a solution. Regardless of whether it's in your scope or not, I mean, I don't understand what you mean by scope. You're making adjustments to the bike path. That's obviously within the right-of-way. I don't know. The legislature said you weren't to address the bike path? Or why is it not in your scope?
No, it basically talked about capacity improvements and safety on the highway, which were our main criteria we were looking at.
Well, I guess regardless, it would have been nice, I think, in the concept report, I think what we typically look at is a comprehensive look at the issues and at least make an attempt to address the issues, even if you don't have the money for it, it should be at least addressed, I think. I mean, it is part of the, a context-sensitive design, isn't it, to review issues and all the issues?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I don't see it here.
Thank you, Mr. Spring. Mr. Strike?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. I think I found your money. I know exactly where you can find the money. You're 10 months ahead of schedule. You can take it out of your budget, out of the state's budget for how you're administering the project. You're 10 months ahead. You weren't expecting that, so you do have the money.
Well,
so I'm going to beg that off that question.
Well, it's that was part of the proposal by the contractor. He figured that in to give us the detail he did within the $42.5 million. So for what we're getting right now, that was considered in his original $42.5 million.
He figured it in his cost. I'm saying it's in the state's cost because these are now workers you don't have to have work on the project for 10 months.
But on the other hand, they had to accelerate their schedule to make that.
But you didn't accelerate yours.
State costs.
The state saved the money. You got 10 months of project management that you no longer have to provide.
Okay.
I'm still confused why we're here and what we're expected to approve tonight or being asked to approve tonight.
Okay.
Question for staff. This context-sensitive design. Basically, we don't pass the resolution or anything. Am I correct on that?
Mr. Chair, for the context-sensitive design, typically it comes in three packages to you separated in time. And there is no write-up for the context-sensitive design, but there is for the design study report as well as for the future plans in hand that goes to the Urban Design Commission, and there are resolutions for the DSR and the plans in hand.
Yeah, but at the rate a project like this is going, the construction, it's all your fault, Barry. I want you to know that.
I wish I could apologize.
And by the way, I've got 26 years with Keywood. I should disclose that earlier, so I know what I'm saying when it's all your fault. So anyway, it's the contractor's fault that the construction is now ahead of the design. And so, I mean, unfortunately, in the chair's opinion, this is a waste of everybody's time because we're not asked to provide any input. We don't agree with all the solutions. We don't agree with the choices. But unfortunately, and it's not at you, gentlemen, by the way, DOT frequently is outside of the MOU, okay, in our opinion.
Okay.
And very frequently outside the MOU. And I feel in this case you're also outside the MOU. Maybe because of the nature of this, it should have been addressed differently. But we have design-build projects come before us very, very frequently. But normally, they're not this far along within 4 or 5 months of completion. I mean, what changes could we make that aren't cast in concrete or embankment right now? You guys are marching right along. You don't have any changes. You know, if we wanted to change the bridge grade to about 2 feet, I'd have 3 people jumping up and down pretty excitedly. Maybe rightly so on that one. Mr. Sporhees.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Before I was appointed to this commission, I had the opportunity to attend your guys' presentation down at City Hall when you originally did this with the executive staff. And now that I sit on this commission, I'm kind of questioning why the project wasn't brought forward to this board when it was presented to the municipality. It seems like they would kind of go hand in hand, and maybe if we could kind of marry those up in the future, would that be possible?
Yeah, I believe that was prior to the award of the contract. We didn't have a design at that time. All we had was a really preliminary concept. So there wasn't anything to really submit or to review. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, if I could add on to that, we were actually kind of wondering ourselves what the real purpose of us coming here tonight was, and it was, I guess, our interpretation with the DOT of the concept of the project in our limited discussion with the Muni planning. But we could have certainly made a presentation before we went out to even procurement for a design builder with a concept. It would fall outside the current process because we would have not have had any plans in hand or a design study report. But we did have a lot of ideas about what the performance and prescriptive requirements are. So in the future with this type of project, that would probably be a lot more useful to you and us as well, because we were going out to the community groups at that time.
Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. Through the chair, there's no plan then to go to the plans in hand stage that would typically go to the Urban Design Commission. You're going to go to them after you've completed the project and have them review the plan set at that point?
Not if it's a waste of everybody's time.
I think to answer the question, the reason you're here is to basically voice displeasure that we've got to figure out a better process. And I think that, that's what my comments or my review was not on specifics, because that would have been a waste of my time. And so my suggestion, perhaps starting with staff, is that minimally you take a look at whether there's a different process involved when it's a design-build project versus a non-design build project, and factor that in, so that there's, I think to all of us, I think we think that's kind of a little bit disingenuous of a reason as to why we're here now. But that said, if there are legitimate reasons that are different, or different processes that can be tweaked, I think that's in everybody's interest. You know, in this case, we're not plowing through neighborhoods and dealing with all kinds of other issues, but no doubt there are some significant issues that you're grappling with, and some that were raised here tonight. So anyway, appreciate your coming here and sharing this, and hopefully willingness to figure out that process at an earlier stage.
Ms. McConnell and Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioners, for pointing out potential changes that could be made to this process, which I agree are probably necessary at this point. The old code classifies streets of collector class or greater as public facilities, and thus the Planning and Zoning Commission is obligated by code to do a public facility site plan review. In 2008, the context-sensitive solutions strategy was adopted by the municipality, and in, I forget if it was 2010 or 2012, the MOU that Mr. Ferguson mentioned was signed between DOT and the municipality agreeing on a certain process for road projects. There's nothing in that MOU about when that process changes, when DOT decides to do a design-build process, what are we supposed to do? I had never heard of that, of a road project happening in that way before this project came forward. It's been a little frustrating on how to handle these projects because this is the second of 3 DOT projects that seem to have jumped ahead of this process that we've agreed upon in the MOU. So clearly, it seems that DOT is revising how they work on some projects, which is certainly their prerogative, but it appears that it may be time to revisit this MOU and rediscuss how these projects will come forward, because if there isn't always going to be a concept report or a design study for the Commission to review, then the process isn't going to work. So I have certainly passed that on through my chain of command. I don't have the authority to just start renegotiating an MOU. But you'll be seeing this again with the northern access to the UMed, which is at 75% design, and you haven't seen a DSR yet.
Yeah, but at least they're not 50% in construction.
That is true.
That's an advantage. Ms. O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out that for this particular case, there were no comments that were received from the municipal reviewing agencies for the case. However, there is a technical review that takes place outside or prior to the design study report coming to us. I tracked down those comments from the coordinator of those comments in private development. I don't know why it's there. And they're included in Section 2 of your packet. The design study report that was reviewed for tonight's meeting did not address any of the comments that were made by the municipality during the technical review. And so on page 8 of your packet, beginning on page 7, were 3 conditions that were placed on this design study report. And one of them, I think, is particularly important in that the comments provided by the municipal review agencies for the 60% design submittal that are included in Section 2 of this packet are incorporated by reference as conditions of approval that must be resolved, and that it is necessary to amend the plans and hand documents as required and to submit, submit corrected plans and hand documents. But they do need to be addressed, and I did not see them addressed in the design study report. The comments that were addressed were basically from state agencies, not from municipal review agencies.
Can I speak?
Briefly.
The design study report did not address those because the design study report was reviewed at the same time as those plans. But those comments, I try to touch on it briefly. We are meeting with the municipality. The most significant comments, most of them we just said we'd accept them, and we'll continue to discuss that, and those will be addressed.
Okay. Ms. O'Brien, did the traffic department comment on this? I didn't find it in the packet.
Mr. Chair, Dan Boots from Traffic Safety had comments that are on page 17 of the packet. And Randy Burke from MOA Transit, well, they had no comments. So 4 comments came from Traffic Safety, which is located in traffic, transportation, traffic engineering.
Thank you.
There were no comments from the traffic engineer or from staff with traffic engineering, other than from Dan Boots.
What is the wish of the body?
Thank you.
Well, I think we've had a whoops. Mr. Strike.
This is a question to the chair. What, in the staff, what is the consequence of taking no action this evening on this matter?
I'll let staff go first. Prerogative of the chair.
Through the chair, Mr. Strike, the practical consequences would probably be nothing. I expect DOT will continue their construction as they've been doing for the last however many months, and it'll finish up in October of 2015. Technically, the commission is supposed to be approving public facilities through a site plan review.
In a timely manner,
Of course.
not after the fact. My issue with that is that it seems disingenuous that it comes before us after the fact.
Does the commission suggest that this project should have not come before you and that the code requirement should have been ignored?
No, that it should have been timely brought forth. By the petition.
Yeah. I think that, at the minimum, we should have a resolution that objects that it was brought forth in an untimely manner, that this may, that the MOU with the Department of Transportation should be reviewed to see if it could be better address this. I don't like tearing apart people at the meeting, but I mean, we've got an issue here. And third, I would recommend that it not go before UDC, because there's nothing for the UDC to do and the nature of this project. But I'm not making a motion because the chair can't make a motion. Mr. Spring?
I'm sorry, just a question through the chair, through the staff. Erica, you said that this is a public facility site plan review? I don't see any reference to that in the staff report.
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, since the context-sensitive solution strategy was adopted, we have referenced that strategy rather than the code citation of public facility site plan review.
Okay, because I remember in the other context-sensitive studies that we've received, we weren't asked to do anything.
No, you are always asked to approve the design study report.
Oh, design, okay, I see. Yes, right. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
You done, Mr. Spring? Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the design study report. I'd also like to add a fourth condition that we, as the MOA, communicate to the DOT that future design build projects be brought through the MOA context-sensitive design process in a timely manner in order to ensure that all relevant issues are identified and relevant changes can be made to the design prior to that design build process.
We have a motion. We have a second by Ms. Barker.
If I could just speak to it. So I'm supporting the motion. I know there's very little that we can do if we say no to it. I don't know that that does anything either. I guess my one thought relative to the chair's comment about plans in hand is it still is relevant for the UDC to review the landscaping process and landscape design, and it would always be possible to ask that additional landscaping be installed next year. Again, clearly it's not going to change the roadway, but it potentially, I think that's what staff's recommendation is, and I concur with it.
Ms. Barker, do you care to speak to the motion?
I'll echo the frustration of this body that we've not had a chance to look at this until really the horse is well outside of the barn. And my personal preference would have been, I mean, this kind of level of disgust I have over this would be to simply defer any recommendation. However, I understand the logic in our going ahead and taking action on it simply in order to go on the record with a recommendation for how this very broken process can be fixed in the future. For that reason, I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. Mr. Spring.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I'll be supporting the motion. I think the project, from what I've read, is meets the need as identified in the long-range transportation plan, and I think it's a very important project. The solutions look like they address the problems in general with the grade and brake light hill and the bridges. I think it'll be a real benefit to the community, and the solutions are probably going to work. I am disappointed about the bicycle connection. I think there could have been more done for that, but there may be another opportunity later when Artillery Road interchange is completed or reconstructed, because that's also slated to be done. So hopefully that will happen then, because if it doesn't, then I'll really be mad. Because it's got to happen sometime. There's no reason that it should be overlooked twice. I really hope that it's next time when, and it will be done. I think Artillery Road will be redesigned. So I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you for coming.
Commissioner Strike.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. I'd like to commend Kiewit, the contractor, for pushing the project through, being ahead of schedule, looking at the cost, et cetera. So don't misinterpret my vote. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote.
Anybody have any further comments? Further comments at all? I'd like to express displeasure with DOT, and not the individual speaking tonight. I will make that perfectly clear, or the contractor or the quality control team. My objection is that I don't feel that they have made a sincere effort to honor the MOU. You sat through the housing analysis earlier. If the team had gone through this review, I'm certain we could have saved a lot of the low-income housing that got plowed under, because by the time it came to us, not your project, the 92nd Avenue project, by the time it came to us, the houses were already down. And that's something that we're looking at to try to view. We have a motion.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Can I have a clarification on the motion, please?
Okay.
I just wondered if the department recommendations were included in the motion. Did I not hear that, or is it not?
No, if I didn't say that, that was my intent, and I added a fourth recommendation
Oh, you did?
as well.
Okay. All right.
After we vote, I got one house banking, so you three don't run off yet. All in favor, please vote. Or all, let everyone please vote. That motion carried 8-1. Thank you very much. Can we please have your three names, gentlemen, name and spell your last name, please?
Brian Schumacher, SCHUMACHER.
Paul Witt with HDR, letters HDR. Last name spelled WITT, and project manager for owner's representative.
And Barry Fitzgerald with Kiewit, FITZGERALD.
All right. Thank you very much. The next case before us is case 2015-0025, but that's a public hearing. I'm going to read the outline on the public hearing. The procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meeting is, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public's testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission's rules of procedures. Petitioners, including all are his and her representatives, 10 minutes. Part of the time may be saved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., 5 minutes, individuals 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the Commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the Commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to the action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except Commission recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the Clerk's Office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the Commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. Case 2015-0025, it's a request for rezone from R3 Mixed Residential District to I1, generally located at the end of Camelot Drive, east of Boniface Parkway. May we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a letter of support from the public that has been laid on the table. I just wanted to point the Commission to this letter that was received late today from Spinell Homes in support of the rezone, the petitioner's request. Northwest Auto Parts is requesting rezoning of a vacant 5-acre parcel from R3 to I1. They plan to expand their existing automotive recycling business, which is located on property south and west of the petition site. The Northeast Community Council also provided a resolution of support for the rezoning. The proposed rezoning to I1 meets the approval criteria for zoning map amendments. This rezoning complies with the policies of Anchorage 2020 and the East Anchorage District Plan. The rezoning will implement the East Anchorage District Plan land use map, which designates the site as industrial. The draft Anchorage industrial land assessment found that there is insufficient vacant industrial zoned property within the Anchorage Bowl to meet demand through 2030. Right-of-way or public use easement dedications on the south and east sides of the petition site should be required prior to changing the zoning map. Camelot Drive and Newell Street will be important streets for east-west and north-south traffic circulation for the area. And the subject parcel is unlikely to be subdivided, which is the usual method for obtaining right-of-way. The R2M and R3 and R4 zoned areas are either already developed with relatively dense housing or are likely to be developed or redeveloped with dense housing, creating the need for these road connections. The Municipal Traffic Division has stated that traffic volumes and congestion on the arterial roadway system in the area indicates a lack of a collector system to support neighborhood traffic movements. Camelot Drive runs east-west along the south boundary of the petition site and is one of only 3 east-west connections to Boniface Parkway between DeBar Road and the Glen Highway, which are approximately a mile apart. Currently, there is only one east-west connection between Muldoon Road and Boniface Parkway between DeBar Road and the Glen Highway, and it is a circuitous route. Once Whisperwood Park Drive and Newell Street are constructed, this will be another east-west route between Boniface Parkway and Turpin Street. Newell Street and Whisperwood Drive will likely be heavily used to access the Glen Highway without going out to the arterial street system. Increased neighborhood connectivity is vital for the life, safety, and circulation needs of existing and future residents of the area. The Department's recommending approval for the petitioner's request to rezone the property to I-1, subject to an effective clause requiring dedication of 30-foot of right-of-way or recordation of a 30-foot wide public use easement on the south and east boundaries of the property. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, my question is on Camelot and Newell Street, when they give up the right-of-way, are they going to be required to build the street?
Provide either dedicating the right-of-way or no. Either dedicating the right-of-way or their option for recording public use easement. Neither of them will trigger the need to construct the road.
What would trigger getting that road built, those two roads built?
So roads are built either through a bond, through some sort of funding, public funding.
Sometimes they're built because somebody is subdivided.
Yeah, so the subdivider would build right-of-way. The issue here is that they may not subdivide, and so
Right.
we wouldn't get the right-of-way. The developer of the property, the owner, when they develop the property, may be required to extend driveways to buildings or construct as much of the right-of-way as they would need to service their site. But I imagine that it would only be public dollars that would actually build the east-west, north-south connections unless either the site is developed in a certain fashion or it's subdivided.
Okay, I just wanted that information for the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, question. The recommendation for dedication of the right-of-way or recordation of a public use easement, I assume that can be done without requiring that they pursue a platting process?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spring?
Yeah, everybody's focusing on the dedication. I can see why. I appreciate the fact that the staff recommended right-of-way, because I don't know how this property can be developed without the adequate street system, at least the right-of-way. But a question I have is regarding, let's see, there's Camelot and there's Newell, sorry. Newell was designated as a Class 1B collector in the 2014 OSNHP. Class 1B collectors require, or are generally require 70-foot right-of-way. So I'm wondering, why is staff recommending 30-foot right-of-way or easement instead of a 35-foot? And I follow up with the fact that I think when they designated the Newell 1B, that they thought it might be more like a residential collector. But if with the zoning goes through, it's going to be industrial land predominantly. And industrial land typically gets a Class 1C industrial collector designation. And if you have trucks going through this area, it's going to need to be upgraded substantially from a more residential collector to industrial collector to handle large trucks. Because I-1, of course, would probably generate large truck traffic. So I just don't understand why it was a 30-foot instead of a 35-foot.
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, you caught a mistake that I made with the staff report. So on page 4 of your packet, I state that it's a Class 1B neighborhood collector. And the official streets and highways plan, the 1C says 60 feet of right-of-way, but as this is 1B, it's 70. It should be 35 feet from either side. So that's correct.
Is 1C still an industrial collector? I'm not sure the designation changed or not. Ask Erica. She did the OSNHP through the chair. Sorry.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Spring. So it lists 3 types of collectors in the official streets and highways plan. I have the page open. And the 1A is industrial commercial. And then there's 2 neighborhood. There's the 1B and 1C. Now, you rightly said, hey, this should be a 70-foot right-of-way because it's 1B. I mistakenly wrote that it should only be 30 feet, but it should be 35 feet. I was looking at the 60 feet when I should have been looking at the 70 feet. That's the reason.
Any more questions for staff? I have a question for staff. What happens to the proposed new Camelot portion and the proposed new Newell Street portion? Where does the other half come from, and what mechanism do we have to fund it?
Mr. Chair, so the other half of both those streets are already provided. As far as improving them, the subdivider may be required to improve them because they're peripheral roads, or roads would be built in the other manner, which is through a road bond or some sort of public project to.
But the other, the other 30, 35 feet, but I'm assuming it's 35 feet, has already been dedicated or obtained, or will be, has been obtained somehow.
Yes, Mr. Chair. There's 30-foot, so for Camelot, the southern half of Camelot, which is not a part of this petition before us, has already been dedicated. And then on the Spinell Homes property, which is on for Newell, the north-south Newell, on the east side of that center line, there's 40 foot of public road easement. So that's again off property. So we have these sort of road potentials on the abutting properties, but not on this one.
Okay, but the south half of the easterly portion of Camelot, looking on page 9, has already been dedicated or by right-of-way?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. At what width?
At 30 feet, and to help the commission and the public follow along, page 11 of your packet shows a 100-scale grid map, sort of a close-up, and you can see how there's 40 foot for Newell in a public road easement and 30 foot dedicated already for Camelot. And so with this effective clause, the other half will be provided. It would be legal to have a road there without the public having to purchase property.
Thank you. Mr. Strike, anything else?
Yes, I think I'm confused. You were on the right track, and that is on the southern half of the easternmost part of Camelot. The portion that's already been dedicated, you said, was 30 feet. But we understand through the conversation with Chairperson Spring that it's an I-1 collector, therefore it's supposed to be 70 feet, therefore each half is 35?
You're almost there. Here's the issue. Newell Street is this collector that I got wrong. It should be 35 feet. So you've got 40 feet on one half, and I've said in this effective clause that they should provide 30 feet, but they should actually provide 35 feet. So that's 35 their half, and then the abutting property could vacate 5 feet of the easement, and then you'd have your 70 feet. For Camelot,
We vote with Strike. If it's 70 feet wide, if you need 70 foot and you've got 40 foot, only 30 foot needs to come from this property.
no, sir. The abutting property is entitled to vacate 5 feet of that public use easement, and we go by from center line. Each side's supposed to provide their matching half, and in this case, it'd be 35 feet from either side.
Okay.
And then in terms of Camelot, I just wanted to make a point about Camelot Drive. Camelot Drive it's a local road, 60 feet right of way. I think Mr. Spring and I are in agreement about that. 60 feet of right of way. And so 30 feet's been provided. The matching half is 30 feet.
But if I look at the map, Camelot is bounded on both sides to the north and south, I-1.
Yes, but the official streets and highways plan, which has been adopted, calls it a local road.
So back to the reason we have the question with the traffic plan, trucks are going to be coming into this area. Are they going to be coming off of Boniface onto Camelot, or are they going to come clear down off of another street from the south and traversing all the way up Newell Street? I'm willing to bet they're going to be coming off Boniface onto Camelot.
There are local roads in commercial areas. The adopted policy, the municipality, is the official streets and highways plan. It's naming this as being a local road. I can't ask for more than 30-foot road dedication unless it was classified differently.
Understood, and I appreciate your response. Great response. Do you see a concern here, though?
Not really. I mean, I am no traffic engineer. This is, it seems to me that there are industrial areas with 60-foot wide roads, 30-foot, either side throughout the municipality. This is quite a short stub of road. I think, Mr. Spring is correct in saying that there should be 70 feet per the classification for Newell, but between Boniface and Newell on Camelot Drive, the traffic engineer is not asking for more than the 30 feet. You can see in their comments. The official streets and highways plan supports that. There's no housing on either side of Camelot Drive. I guess I just don't. We go by minimum requirements, and I couldn't recommend any greater than what the adopted
We'll
policy.
wait and hear from the petitioner then.
Okay. Commissioner Spring?
Yeah. This is really kind of fascinating, really. It's I respect how difficult it is to write the OSNHP and identify all the potential collectors, and so I don't want to be super critical, but it seems to me, in order to address Commissioner Strike's comment, that it would be best to have Camelot Drive designated as a Class 1B or 1A collector. Instead, OSNHP designates East 4th Avenue as a collector. And I don't know what the rationale for that was, but it seems like if Camelot was the collector and a recommendation was made to change the OSNHP to designate Camelot, that would serve this lot and would provide adequate access to this industrial area. Plus, it could be continued through the mobile home park to the east and serve as a continuous east-west collector once that mobile home park is developed. And that would be centrally located between two residential areas, one, the mobile home to the south and the developing multifamily to the north, and would serve as a good, solid collector, rather than East 4th Avenue, which I don't think is particularly well suited or located as a collector. And I think collectors are usually a quarter mile in spacing, or at the most half mile in spacing, and it looks like Camelot's about a quarter mile from the frontage road, and it would meet the criteria of a decent collector if it was. And one other point, I don't know if this policy's changed or not, Mr. Chair, but used to be bonds were only used to fund collectors. There's policy that they aren't used to fund local roads. So there's a real flaw here in that I don't think Camelot's ever going to get built if it's not designated as a collector, unless they change the policy. And we're just going to have a really dysfunctional industrial area here if it's not changed.
Well, but it's beyond the scope of the case before us. I could agree with you, John, but it's beyond the scope. And
sorry, pardon me, Mr. Chair, but it would be an innovative condition or recommendation of a condition of approval to recommend to the Assembly to designate Camelot as a collector and then obtain the 35-foot necessary right-of-way.
Well, I have no issue if you want to raise that as a finding later on, but I think it's beyond right now. If we have no other questions for staff, can the petitioner's representative, if he is awake, wander up here?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Tim Potter, P-O-T-T-E-R for the record, from Dowell. I was only sitting there because I could then all of a sudden see that everybody here had their Wheaties this morning. So based on the conversation and the way that the first hearing went and how this one's going already, and I haven't even had a chance to speak. So I would like to reserve 4 minutes for rebuttal. I'll try and be brief. With me tonight is Michelle Ritter and David Funataki with Dowell. Also with me tonight is Chuck and Chris Osenkop, father-son owners of Northwest Auto Parts. I've personally known Chuck for about 30 years, since the first time I was involved in a land use issue for grandfather rights associated with a portion of his property. The drawings in front of you up here identify the approximately 5-acre parcel kind of at the northeast corner of the colored area. And then the crosshatch area also identifies all of the area that is currently owned by Northwest Auto Parts. So you can see that they own, for the most part, all of the property along Camelot on both sides, except for a couple of pieces out next to Boniface. They have accumulated that property over time as the growth of their business has continued. As indicated in the staff packet, this is truly a recycling company in the grandest sense of the word, and 92% of each vehicle that they acquire from the insurance companies is recycled. In that, they purchase cars through insurance companies following accidents. They do that on a competitive auction basis. The wrecked cars are transported to the property, and they are collected. They go to a certain area. All of the fluids are drained and collected. Gasoline is then used in their fleet vehicles, so that is used. The oils are collected and burned in their on-site additional heating system, so that is used. The antifreeze is collected and resold as a used retail product, which I didn't realize they did, but apparently it's a pretty hot commodity. They then move the cars to another area and deconstruct those vehicles and take the parts off of them. They inventory those parts, and then those are in the future sold. The deconstruction can take two forms. They can do a complete parting out of the vehicle so that every part is taken off and apart and then inventoried and then put on either a shelving system or a racking system after it's been cataloged. And they participate in a nationwide service so that they get referrals and calls for parts from the lower 48, as well as they can make a call to the lower 48 and get parts up here. The other component of the business is the parts that they keep on a vehicle, because in today's construction of vehicles, a lot of them are unibody, and they are kept for a lot of the more common cars that would more typically be have the trends for more repairs being necessary. The body shop can then call them and give them specific measurements for how much of the front end, the side, or the rear end of the vehicle. So it's more than just a fender or a door. They actually take a component, big part of the vehicle, cut that off to very specific technical requirements. That's then transported to the body shop and then welded back in place. 30% of the sales of the parts that come through their facility are sold to folks like you and me that are doing repairs to their vehicles. 70% of the parts actually go back into the auto body industry and are sold as OEM parts versus aftermarket parts. OEM parts if they're used in the repair of your vehicle, are typically 2-year-old parts that then have about half the price tag of a new stamped out part, even aftermarket. They're original equipment, so they actually may fit better. So they help everybody in the process. This rezone, as indicated by the staff, implements and put into place the adopted East Anchorage District Plan that did identify this as industrial. That was recently approved by you and the Assembly. We received support from the Community Council as well as one of the adjacent property owners developing Spinelli Homes or Spinell Homes adjacent to this property directly east. And they have expressed their comments that they believe that the project will be compatible. It was nice to be able to talk to them. We've reviewed the staff recommendations, and this is where we're going to go into the road component. Newell Street is designated a collector, and in as such, and looking at the layout of the neighborhood, we believe that Newell should be dedicated. We would place a public use easement on the eastern portion of the property to meet that requirement. The staff and the city traffic engineer had only indicated 30 feet in all of the meetings that we've had with them. I believe that's because when you go up and down Newell Street, there's kind of offsetting mixture of widths of right-of-way, and they were kind of focusing on the midline of that. If it ends up being 35 feet and that becomes a requirement, we can live with that. The part that is of contention, though, is Camelot. Camelot is an industrial road to the extent that it's developed at this time. It is a local street, and while the Planning Commission, one more minute, you can pass whatever you'd like to pass, but within the code, you do not have the authority through this action to ask for more than 30 feet. So just to set that aside, and the thought that you would then send this with the recommendation to the Assembly to make Camelot a collector, you may want to do that, but that's, again, outside the context of our request at this time. We believe that it does not make any sense, and in fact, it's a dangerous precedent set to focus a significant amount of and growing residential traffic through an industrially zoned and industrially developed area, and that really does not make sense. And we should not bear the brunt of 4th Avenue and 6th Avenue not necessarily being set up right. I think it's important to note before you start talking about fixing the circulation pattern in this area that, in fact, 4th Avenue is the road that has a signal on Boniface. It was placed there from a distance standpoint to Boundary Street and serves the area for full movement direction. I think it's also important to note that 6th Avenue, again, also serves as a residential type collector. One more minute again, I'll keep 2 for rebuttal. And in that Camelot makes no sense to have the industrial traffic and then a bunch of residential traffic racing through it to get to Boniface. The other thing that needs to be stated is that if you look in your drawings at Boniface, at where Camelot is, look where the street across the street lines up. They are not aligned. That's a very dangerous situation to have. Not exactly sure how it came to bear and or why, but there are a significant number of accidents at that location, and to direct additional traffic to that location that may want to turn left or right and not have a controlled intersection at that location would be a disaster. So for that reason, we are requesting that you require
Mr.
us
Potter,
to...
if you want any rebuttal, you better...
1 minute for rebuttal.
Oh, you're okay.
No, I'm getting close, but I'll have enough. Just to close out, that we go ahead and put through a public use easement for Newell Street, which would be the collector and would significantly improve the circulation in the area when it's constructed fully. Second, that we be required to establish a development setback of 30 feet on the southern portion of our parcel. That will prevent us from building any structures or any required parking, so that if and when the city believes that this road needs to go through to service the area, that there is not a building or a parking lot that has to be acquired. With that, I'd just like to request your approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Potter. You've got 1 minute left on that. If I may paraphrase what you said at the end there. 35 foot on Newell, 30 foot on Camelot, with a 30-foot development setback, which would keep you from putting required parking in that developmental setback.
Yes, I would request that it be whatever the width of the public use easement on Newell be resolved with the municipal traffic engineer. You can take up to 35 feet for a collector on the perimeter of a site, but that's based on multiple meetings that we've had with her. 35 feet has never been the discussion. It's always been 30. Now, if it concludes that she wants 35, we'll do the 35.
All right, Commissioner Spring.
And the other part of that was simply to take the south 30 feet of the proposed parcel being rezoned and dedicate or record a development setback easement there to prevent any structures or required parking to be developed.
Thank you. Commissioner Spring?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Those are good points, I think, Tim, about the 4th Avenue. I didn't realize there was a light there. And I saw that awkward intersection there, but sometimes, things aren't planned out very well in this town.
Right, and the state DOT has indicated that they are considering putting an odd puzzle piece at Camelot and Boniface. So effectively, the access to Camelot, it would be right in, right out, or left in. There would be no left out.
So getting back to Commissioner Strike's comment originally,
and just so
is the access going to be primarily off of Boniface and Camelot, do you think, to this site?
It has always been to Boniface from Camelot and vice versa. And the municipal traffic engineer told us that we would not be able to take access to Newell Street because she believes that's a residential collector, and any loads that would exceed 10,000 pounds would not be allowed to go on Newell. So effectively, except for our employees, it would not be utilized for our circulation.
And so the plan is to develop the site and to basically put a driveway from the end of Camelot into the site and not even need a road. You don't need a road. You aren't going to ever build a road.
That is correct. In a perfect world, we'd be applying for a vacation of Camelot. At this time, Northwest Auto Parts plows all the snow and maintains the road at this time. The city does not, under an agreement with them. So that it's basically their driveway 12 months of the year anyway. We would be looking to vacate that. We would hope at that time that the city would get its act together with 4th and 6th Avenue, potentially place another signal at 6th Avenue under the shadow of the 4th Avenue signal so that they would work in combination. But yeah, there is a little bit of a dilemma in the area. We are looking to have a large pre-engineered building constructed on the parcel, and much of the deconstruction work would be occurring inside the structure, and then the rest of it would be used for inventory storage of the parts. And when you look at it, the mall, which is down on Boniface, would eventually
Mr. Potter,
be...
You're sure wandering on his questions.
I'm trying to explain just...
You're sure wandering.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Spring, anything else?
No, I appreciate the clarification. I don't think it's a good situation to stub out a road into a parcel. And that's the problem with our whole city, is the fact that there's a discontinuous road system and nothing connects. And that's why we have so much traffic on arterial roads and
And we have an industrial location here that's been developed. Northwest Auto Parts, in effect, the first part of the business has been in operation there since 1959. So,
I don't have any problem, through the chair, with industrial designation. I think that whole section should probably be industrial, since that seems to be the desired use of the area. But I'm just concerned with the road circulation system.
Mr. Walker?
So your last comment in your testimony, you talked about a development setback along what would be the south portion of the parcel that we're rezoning.
yes.
Or that you're attempting to rezone. And I guess I want to clarify, when you suggest a development setback, is that an alternative to the right-of-way or the public use easement? Is that
Yes.
something different?
Yes.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that?
A development setback continues the property in the property owner's ownership. They pay taxes on it, but they cannot build a building or permanent structure, and they cannot build required parking within that area, so that it's used to prevent someone from building something in the middle of a roadway. If you remember back to Diamond and C Street, and it was clearly obvious to everybody and their dog that C Street was going to be extended to the south, and then someone built a two-story building right where C Street was obviously going to go. And DOT and the public got to buy that building. DOT did use it as an office for some time for the project, but that's what a development setback prevents, that it prevents someone from building a structure or improvements that are required to service the structure that would have real value beyond what the land value is. Prevent that from occurring.
So the objective is to keep that component of the site in the possession of the owner and not to relinquish it as right-of-way or?
Until such time as that circulation pattern is brought forward, the studies are done to make sure that that's really the best thing to do. You know, one of the things that is going on there's already a half-width public right-of-way. The city has allowed the Osenkops to fence that off on the eastern end because, as everybody here knows, that almost every treed or vegetated piece of land that isn't maintained by somebody has someone living on it, camping on it, or doing other not-so-great things in and amongst our neighborhoods. And part of the request would be, even if this were to be pressed to be a public use easement, that until such time as the city was going to actually construct that road, that the Osenkops be able to continue to manage that area so that they have the right and the authority to fence it off and keep everybody else from being there that are doing things that aren't necessarily good for the rest of us.
I can see how that would be better for a property owner. I'm not familiar with this as an alternative to a public use easement or a right-of-way. Can you describe, it sounds to me like, well, the municipality would have the opportunity to condemn that at some point in the future without any significant overhead or cost, or what does that condemnation look like?
They would be able to come in, and if they could prove the need to have eminent domain or condemnation, they'd just have to pay appraised value for the property. And it would just be the land that they would be buying.
If we vacate that today, will the muni have to pay for it, or does that just magically disappear into the
Didn't understand the question.
So based on the department's recommendations were to establish a 30-foot right-of-way or public use easement there. If we do that today, that's not a condemnation. Basically that strip of land is going to convert from private property into public property, more
Correct.
or less.
Correct.
And with no compensation to...
No compensation, no assurance that it's really going to be needed or used by the public in the future.
Right.
And be a problem which that property owner that owns both sides will have to deal with until such time it does become a road.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thanks.
Commissioner Sporres?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I was hoping that you could maybe further clarify what you're saying about the mall and they agreed to access before you got stopped.
When, this is a multi-generational business now, and Chuck has managed to acquire properties up and down Camelot over time, and the mall out next to Boniface will be the ultimate location of the retail sales office. So instead of the retail buyers going all the way down to the end of what is now Camelot, they would be stopping and purchasing those parts out of the mall. So as the deconstruction phase goes, and then inventory and all that happens, it would be going from more intense use or messier use up to retail all along that side of the road, basically in buildings, passing from one building to another building until it gets to the retail sale area. That's the long-term plan.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Basically, it just takes the retail traffic out of Camelot and leaves the industrial traffic.
Yes.
Correct. In the back.
Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. Other than the fact that the municipality would have to prove out and acquire the land that would be dedicated as development setback in the future, are there other differences, this is a question for either you or staff, between a PUE and a development setback on the land side? So in other words, how are you treated on that line, that 30-foot line? Do you need to additionally set back from that around parking areas, or can you go right up to that line? What is the main difference between a PUE and a development setback?
It is looked at by the city. That is where you would have to take your landscaping from on the perimeter of a parking lot. Your building setback line starts at that development setback line.
So no difference between a PUE and a development setback at that point. It's really just ownership.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much, Mr.
Great, thank you.
Anyone wish to testify on case 2015-0025, a request to rezone from R3 district to I1. Anyone at all? You're ruining Mr. Potter's evening. He was concerned about it, reserving it. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't want to be the last one to speak, but I wanted to defend the department's recommendation. I didn't want to be the last one to speak, but I wanted to make sure that we made our point. Yeah.
Okay. I'll come back to you after I finish the public hearing, if I may. Anyone wishes to testify? Anyone at all? Mr. Potter, do you have anything to say in rebuttal?
I know that Francis is going to go ahead and say that it's the department's position that, in fact, for the public interest, they need to secure the right-of-way at this time. And I can certainly understand that position. I think typically in a rezone, it's unusual for these types of entitlements to be taken. As far as an entitlement process, the exactions are, I think, abnormal through a rezone process. Typically, they're done via a platting process or a building permit process, and that's probably the better time to have that happen. I think that to jump to the conclusion that it is appropriate for the access to go through this area to serve as a major access point for a significant amount of residential currently being developed and redeveloped, I think suggests that you're jumping to a conclusion, taking land without the knowledge as to whether or not it's really the appropriate action for the purposes of getting it for nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. I see no questions in the queue. Thank you for your testimony. I now close the public hearing. Mr. McLaughlin. Pardon me. Hang on. Mr. Walker. You good? Okay. Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you. So if the property owner were to subdivide, then there would be no question that they would have to provide the other half of Camelot. Half of the Camelot's already dedicated. Sure, it's not constructed, but if there were to be a subdivision, it would be a requirement of the property owner to dedicate 30 foot of right-of-way. The issue here is that, the property owner is, industrial property, large tracts of it are very valuable. Instead of subdividing, he'll keep that big piece of property. That's why we're dealing with it here. Now, the property is zoned R2M, multifamily residential. So if it were to be developed as residential, there would be an east-west connection. But because the request is to rezone to industrial, when it's developed, we'll likely not get that unless it's constructed by the city or some other way. It's really important that it's provided here, otherwise it'll never happen. Now, it's quite possible that the property owner will get another opportunity to deal with this at a future replatting if he's able to. He could request a vacation of Camelot Drive one day if it made sense from a traffic circulation point of view. But what we have here is we have a 5-acre parcel that's multifamily zoned, and we have large areas of relatively high density or relatively dense residential to the north, east, and southeast. R2M, R3, R4. How are those people to get out to Boniface and to if not to go to the nearest? This is all about traffic circulation, and to leave a half right of way sort of dangling there also seems sort of odd. You've got 30 foot of right of way dedication, but to not provide the matching half, it'll always be sort of a weird mark on this map. The development setback idea Mr. Potter proposes is creative, but it's not. It's a different situation than if they were to record a 30-foot public use easement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, then Mr. Voorhees.
So I guess my personal feeling is that this development setback leaves the door wide open for development of Camelot later on, but it gives the owner control of the site today. And I know I've personally struggled with this issue before. I mean, you've got a public use easement, and the public uses it, and not as a road, or not the way it was legally meant to be used, but they use it in other ways, and they won't have any control over that. So why is the development setback a bad solution to that problem?
Two ways that it's not good for the public. One, it would have to be somehow acquired by the public in order to construct the right-of-way. If there's recordation of a public use easement, then the property is there for the rights of the public, and a road could be built. They just provide a notice of utilization of the easement to the property owner, and it's constructed. If it were simply a development setback, then one, the project would have to purchase it, and I mean, the right-of-way wouldn't be there. You just have a half right-of-way sort of dangling there. So it's mostly about cost, but it would secondarily, I guess, if the development setback, your required setback wouldn't begin at the development setback. It would, so that is to say, for most industrial, so the industrial district has setbacks as well, and their setback wouldn't begin at the development setback. That this would become their development setback, so they could build all the way up to what could be right-of-way.
Ms. McConnell, do you care to weigh in at this time on that?
Yes, and I actually have another comment as well, but I think Mr. Robinson and Mr. Potter clarified that the front yard setback would begin at the edge of the development setback, not at the property boundary. But the other point that I wanted to make is Mr. Potter seemed to leave you with the impression that the municipality has permitted the applicant to use the existing 30 feet of Camelot. And while it is true that the municipality has not come to speak to the applicant about the fact that they've fenced off that right-of-way, they do not have a right-of-way permit to use that. Now, the planning department, the traffic department, and private development have expressed to the petitioner that R3 sections have no problem with them continuing the situation of using the Camelot right-of-way for storage, access, whatever they need it for, and prohibiting public access to that area until such time as Camelot is constructed. However, that decision does rest with the right-of-way section. We don't actually control that section. So I just wanted to clarify that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McConnell. Mr. Voorhees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question's for you, Mr. McLaughlin. So I understand there's been a lot of discussion about this new adjacent development that Spinelli's putting together. Just so I'm clear, would the municipality or the right-of-way agencies, would they be going after this 30-foot setback if there was not a rezone currently?
Through the chair, Mr. Voorhees, with an entitlement you sort of open yourself up to the rules. So if they were to be applying for a subdivision, then they'd have to dedicate right-of-way. They're asking for an upzoning from residential multifamily zoning to an industrial zoning, and this is an opportunity to provide that needed east-west connection. Now, these sorts of effective clauses for right-of-way dedication, or not right-of-way dedication, but recordation of a public road easement, do occur. I've reviewed at least 3 rezones that have required this sort of thing. One was a Birchwood industrial site. Another one was a rezoning in South Anchorage off of Toloff and near Abbott Road. But when you have a rezoning and you have a substandard road, or in this case a half right-of-way dedication, this is where we get the other half. This is it.
So the short answer is no. If they were not applying for a rezone, then you would not be going after the right of way, correct?
Correct. My purpose was just saying that this is the normal way of going about getting our roads.
I understand that. Thank you. And that's kind of where I'm having a rub with this one, is that it seems that while you're going through the motions to acquire the right of way without the current need for one, and taking private property and turn it into public lands without compensation. Is that correct? That
is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, there are no further questions in the queue. We've been here for almost 2 hours. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we will take up the what is the wish of the body. We'll take a 10-minute recess. We are back in session. What is the wish of the body on 2015-0025? Commissioner Spring.
I move to recommend approval of the rezoning to I-1 Light Industrial District, subject to an effective clause requiring dedication of 35 foot of right-of-way, or recordation of 35 foot of public use easement along the east lot boundary, and 30 foot right-of-way or 30 foot recordation of 30 foot wide public use easement along the south boundary.
Okay, so basically that's the staff recommendations, changing 30 to 35 feet.
Along the east boundary.
East boundary only. The south boundary would remain as stated. I have a second by Mr. Robinson. Mr. Spring, do you care to speak to your motion?
Yes, I mean, I've heard the word of taking involved here, and I just don't buy this as a taking. I mean, all properties require access, and all properties will be asked to provide adequate access as part of their development. I mean, I don't know of many cases where we said, well, we just not even bother with it. Let's just let them extend a driveway to their lot for their use without any regard to whether or not the adjacent properties need that right away or need access to. I mean, and I know there's the petitioner's representative brought up the conflict between industrial and residential, but sometimes in the way we have the zoning set up, there has to be some conflict. And in this case, there's going to be conflict regardless of whether or not we extend this this connection to the east, because there's industrial all up and down Boniface, and there's residential all up and down the east side of the industrial. So there's going to be conflict regardless of whether or not we extend this or not. I mean, and I think the conflict is going to be minimal, given that the extent of the industrial is reasonably shallow, and it is I-1 after all. At least it's not I-2. If it was I-2 or near the port, you would have double-wide trailers and definitely some problems there. And I'm not pushing the issue of the size of the easement. I think the size of the easement might be a little bit on the south side, a little bit light, but the petitioner, I think, had some good points about the adequacy of the intersection there, and I think 30 foot will have to suffice.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Robinson, do you care to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. I'll be supporting the motion. First of all, from a land use standpoint, I think the fact that we have all simply only focused on access issues and not on the use itself shows that it's the appropriate use for the site, and also consistent with the recently adopted East Anchorage District Plan. It has community support and is a viable extension of an existing and longstanding business in the community. I would, I guess, echo Mr. Springs' sentiment. I was swayed to some degree by the pitch to frame it as a development setback rather than public use easement. But, upon reflection, development is for a long time. We're rezoning to I-1 now. Nothing says that it won't be rezoned 30 or 40 years from now. And the ability to have good street connections is important. I think that in the meantime, it may not actually be built out to the street, but there's plenty of room for the owner to expand their business while also ensuring that long-term we have the ability to provide better street connections.
Thank you, Mr. Voorhees and Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting the motion. I agree with Mr. Spring and Commissioner Robinson and echo their thoughts. I do differ in the sense that I am having a tough time getting over the hurdle of a right-of-way on a side street on Camelot Drive when the access to Boniface Parkway is still not determined. There's no apparent need for the right-of-way at this time, and it seems to me like I understand the processes and procedures of the code and when it is time to take right-of-way. However, I think that the petitioner did argue a very good case on the development setback, and I believe that there should be a vehicle that would allow the property owner to have a development setback with the understanding that when a traffic study, circulation study represents the need for the additional access and the additional footage for the right-of-way, that would be granted at that time. But to take the property today, I'm having a tough time with.
Thank you. Mr. Walker.
Well, I'm still deciding if I'm going to propose an amendment here, but I'm still struggling with this issue of the PUE right-of-way versus a development setback or some other method of reserving that without converting this from private to public ownership. And the reason is that if we were platting this, let's imagine that we were putting a cul-de-sac right down the middle of this site and with lots on both sides of that cul-de-sac, we would have to create access to the lots that we were subdividing. But this property is already subdivided, it already has access, and yet now, without any project on the boards whatsoever, we're basically carte blanche saying that they need to give up a 30-foot wide strip of this property, which arguably may have a value of in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's say somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000, just for argument's sake. That would be between $5 and $10 a square foot, which I think would be a reasonable price. So I guess I'm really struggling with that particular issue. I'm not getting the sense that I would get a lot of traction if I propose an amendment to make that a development setback, and I think that needs some refining, but I guess I'd like to hear other people's comments on that. And if we are going to go down the road of converting this from private to public ownership, maybe we could put something in there that's going to give them control of that until such time as it's used. So I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Voorhees. Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After hearing Mr. Walker's comments, I would support an amendment of that nature. I think we have an opportunity before us tonight to take this development setback and maybe produce or use a model, because I do not think that this will be the last time that this body is going to hear a case like this.
Thank you. I'll try again. Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also resound with Mr. Walker's argument here and would entertain a motion. I'm really uncomfortable with the notion of taking an exaction on a rezone for a street that actually doesn't really have anything to do with the property. It serves it adequately in its current condition. So.
Seeing no one in the queue, my issue is property taxes. If we take it, then I don't know, the property taxes on this strip of land is $30,000 or $40,000 a year is what I would put some numbers in my head based upon your value.
Like 0.015 is a mill rate on, say, 150 grand would be more like, I don't know, not that much. I mean, you'd be a couple grand, probably.
Couple grand?
Yeah.
Okay. You just lost a vote. Anyway, the fact I like to have land in private hands because they pay taxes. When it goes into public hands, we all share the additional tax burden on it. I do think that we have to provide for the continuity, so I will be supporting the motion.
Call the question.
Okay, Mr. Walker was in the queue before you said that, so Mr. Walker gets to speak.
So I'd like to propose an amendment. So shall I?
Do it now.
Okay. I would support this motion with the following amendment, that we strike from the second to the last line, line 3 of the department recommendations, we would strike the words south and we would add a new sentence reading, and a 30-foot development setback along the south border. Now, with that said, I would like to talk briefly about the distance, because there are already setbacks in the I-1 district, and I don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot here if that development setback needs to be.
Okay, we've got a motion, but the machine doesn't show it.
Okay.
Hit the motion button. Thank you.
Okay.
We have a motion. We now have a second.
Okay.
So you may talk about your motion.
Okay. So I'd like to stick with that wording unless someone else has some suggestions. And then perhaps the staff could shed a little bit of light on the setbacks for I-1. I don't have my code book sitting in front of me, but I don't want to give them 30 feet and have them build up to the 30-foot mark, and then suddenly that defeats the entire purpose of what we're attempting to do here.
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, the front setback in the I-1 is 10 feet. The side and rear setbacks are 20 feet if adjacent to a residential district, otherwise 0 or at least 5.
I'm sorry, side did you say was?
Side and rear are 20 if adjacent to a residential district, otherwise 0 or at least 5. This would be a front setback, so it would be 10 feet.
Okay, so a 30-foot development setback.
Plus 10 feet for where you could put a structure.
Okay. So without getting mired in the details, I'm just going to go with 40 feet. I'll stick with my current wording. We'll call it a 40-foot development setback along the south border.
Point of information, Mr. Walker, I think you mean to say 30-foot development setback, not 40, because I had misspoke earlier. Yard setbacks, this 10-foot setback, begins from the development setback.
It does?
It does.
Okay, then I will stick with my original language.
Okay, we have a motion for us to change the language to allow a 30-foot development setback. Do we have any further discussion? Please use your machines. One more's got to vote. Wow. That carried 5-4. It's one of the most split votes I've seen here. So that motion carried. Now we're to Mr. Spring's motion. Mr. Spring, you had a motion, you had a second. It's sort of been changed here. I guess you could either accept the amendment or withdraw your motion.
Oh, I thought, sorry, through the chair, I thought that amendment was good, and it's now the main motion's changed.
Okay, all right, okay, I'll buy that, yeah.
Since I'm speaking, I won't be supporting the motion.
All right.
The main motion.
Back to the main motion. All in favor? That carries 7-2. So it's been approved with a 30-foot developmental setback on the south boundary. That completes case 2015-0025. The next case before this body is 2015-0023, Shearline Construction request for rezone from R2A, two-family residential large lot, to an R2M, generally located east of Lake Otis Parkway and south of Laura Road and north of East Avenue Road. Do we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The petitioner, Shearline Construction, is requesting to rezone a 21,000 square foot parcel from R2A, two-family residential district, to R2M, multifamily residential district. The property currently is developed with a single-family home. It is an older home and needs to be demolished and the property redeveloped. Rezoning of this property will allow for 7 residential units to be constructed and included within the 16 South condominium project that is directly east and south of the subject property. The Yankage 2020 designates this property as within a transit-supportive development corridor. Transit-supportive development corridors are linked to major employment centers that include residential development of underutilized parcels that will be at a medium to high density to enable more people to live closer to where they work. The residential developments are intended to be pedestrian-oriented to improve connections into the employment centers and to include mixed-use commercial uses providing support services for the residents. The rezoning complies and conforms to the comprehensive plan, specifically policies 5, 6, 7, 9, 30, 34, and 37. The rezoning is generally consistent with the R2M zoning. It is compatible with the surrounding zoning and development. To the north is an undeveloped parcel that's zoned R2M. To the east and south is the 16 South condominium project, which is also zoned R2M. This proposed rezoning from R2A to R2M appears to meet the approval criteria as outlined in AMC 2103-160E and the general intent and purpose of the R2M district. The long-range planning section has provided comments and has no objection to the proposed rezoning, which would allow for this higher density housing on the subject property. So with that being said, staff would like to recommend approval of the rezoning request from R2A, two-family residential district, to R2M, multifamily residential district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dean, then Mr. Spring.
Through the chair, I am a little frustrated with the map on page 13 that staff provided us. It's a little misleading. It doesn't tell us that to the south of this parcel is also R2M. So it makes it look like it's surrounded by R2A when in fact it's not. It's actually surrounded by R2M. And if you look at the applicant's packet, they have provided us with a very nice map showing the areas that are R2M, which is very extensive in that area. Just like to point out, it would have been nice to have a little, better perspective on the map. It's a little...
Through the chair, Ms. Dean, I do recognize that it is a bit misleading, and I do apologize for that.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for apologize. It's just something, Thank you.
Something to be said to using the applicant's material. I think that's been suggested before. Commissioner Spring.
Yes, I didn't see any comments from traffic or state DOT. Who owns the road there?
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, that is a state-owned road.
There was no comment from state DOT?
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, I believe their comment was no comment.
Okay. I'm kind of surprised, I guess, because the proposed site plan has a driveway access there off of for 2 houses on the Lake Otis Parkway, which is a major arterial street. Major arterial streets are supposed to be limited as far as access. This is basically a private driveway on the Lake Otis, and I'm really surprised DOT said, no, I don't have any problem with that. You put a driveway there, it's fine. And there's no reason why you couldn't put a driveway stub off the interior road there and eliminate that driveway and take all the traffic off the Synergy lane and reduce another driveway, which would be good.
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, if I may, I believe DOT looked at this simply from a rezoning perspective rather than a site plan development perspective. Obviously, the petitioner would have to obtain a right-of-way permit, driveway permit through the DOT to develop the property. I don't know if it's possible to, with the development plans for 16 South, to actually make that connection and develop this parcel without the driveway off of Lake Otis. But that's a better question posed to the petitioner's representative.
Okay, any further questions for staff? Applicant's representative, Mr. Sawhill, would you like to come forward?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Jim Sawhill, S-A-W-H-I-L-L. I'm with Lounsbury & Associates, and here tonight representing Shearline Construction in the proposal. We're proposing to rezone approximately a half acre of R2A property to R2M. It's a pretty straightforward proposal. We're surrounded on 3 sites by R2M and have Lake Otis Parkway to the east, which provides additional transitioning to the R2A property to the west of us. We would concur with staff's analysis that we meet the criteria for a rezone. We did provide a presentation of the Community Council last week and got a unanimous approval from the Community Council for the project. They appreciate the quality of the project that Shearline has built with 16 South and support the expansion of that project and the additional density that it provides and entry-level housing that our community so sorely needs. I'll kind of jump into Mr. Spring's question since that's really the end of my presentation. We did have a pre-application meeting with the municipality. Traffic engineering was in attendance to that meeting, and we did discuss the driveway onto Lake Otis, and they indicated to us, Mr. Ferguson, that he would support that driveway since it just had 2 units that was accessing it. And one of the comments we also got from the municipality at that meeting is they would like to see us develop this to a higher density if possible, because they're trying to get as much the highest and best use out of the multifamily properties along transit-supported corridors. And to provide an interior driveway, we would have to eliminate some of the units within 16 South. So I think we would have a reduction in the units that we could develop this through without that additional driveway. And I would also comment that there is an existing driveway there that currently serves a single-family home at that location. And so this would just be adding 1 more unit to that existing driveway. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Spring, are you in the queue or was that left over?
No, I'm always in the queue. Just assume I'm always in the queue.
Mr. Spring.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good rezoning. I think it's a good idea to have higher density there. I'm not objecting to that. And I don't know, I'm not a site planner, so I don't know if you lose a lot there or not. So apparently it's really a city street and not a state street?
That's my understanding, is Lake Otis is a municipal street.
I think you might be right, yeah, you might be right. That might explain some things then. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Any further questions? Mr. Sawhill, you've got 8.5 minutes for rebuttal. Don't go too far.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I now open the public hearing on case 2015-0023, a request to rezone from R2A to R2M. Anyone wish to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing none, Mr. Sawhill, would you care to use your rebuttal time?
I don't have anything to add, Mr. Chair, but I am available for additional questions that the Commission may have.
Thank you very much. I now close the public hearing. I see no questions in the queue. I need a motion. What's the wish of the body? Mr. Robinson.
The matter case 2015-0023, request to rezone 0.48 acres from R2A to R2M. I recommend approval to the Anchorage Assembly that we approve that zoning.
I've got a second by Mr. Kange. Mr. Robinson, do you care to speak to your motion?
No, simply that it almost feels like housekeeping. I think it makes a great degree of sense given the surrounding zoning. The Shearline Construction does quality work, and I think, as we've heard earlier today, there is a need for additional housing. I had the same concerns about the driveway as Mr. Spring had, but that, I think, is outside the purview of this rezoning, and I think we'll let that be handled at the permit center.
Mr. Kange, do you care to speak to the motion?
Thank you. I would just like to add that there were no adverse public comments to this particular project, and the project was and is supported by the Community Council.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion before we vote? People, please use your machine. Congratulations, that motion carries. We will now take up case 2015-0004, approval of the 2015 master plan for the Valley of the Moon Park. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request before the Commission for approval of the 2015 Master Plan Valley of the Moon Park. This plan identifies community needs, addresses issues, public expectations, and establishes a framework for future development of the park for the next 5 to 10 years. The park is a 21.78 acre community use park features facilities that include playgrounds for children and toddlers, 2 picnic shelters, a ball field, community gardens, open space, stream access, 2 parking lots, and bike pedestrian paths. The C Street community gardens are very popular among the users, and the ball field has become a popular place for people to bring their dogs to walk. Parks and Rec staff has worked with the advisory group, park neighbors, and members of the 2009 task force in the development of this master plan, as well as attending meetings at the North Star and South Addition Community Council. 4 meetings were held with the Valley of the Moon advisory group. The advisory group came to consensus on a master plan instead of alternative site plans. The outcome of the meeting resulted in a consensus items outlined on page 34 of the plan, which include expanding the parking lot, fencing and landscaping improvements along West 17th, provide an adult fitness area with ADA access, relocate the portable restroom structure, expand existing bike rack area, and provide a fenced dog park with ADA access, signage, dual entrances, maintain the current north-south alignment of the bike pedestrian trail, and expand the community garden. The plan meets the standards of AMC 2105-040G2 for all park master plan proposals, and it also meets the off-street parking requirements for AMC 2107-090E2, as there is 52 parking spaces with 25 required. However, Parks and Rec staff did conduct a parking study during the summer of 2014 and recommends extending the parking lot to the east with an additional 27 new parking spaces due to some of the activities they found on high-use days. Like I said, the master plan provides a 5 to 10 year vision. The North Star and Community Council, South Addition and North Star Community Council have provided resolutions in support of the master plan. The master plan was approved by the Parks and Rec Commission on January 15th, 2015. Approval of the off-leash dog park, which will take place in the same space that the ball field is, requires a recommendation from the Animal Control Advisory Board to the Parks and Rec Commission and approval by the Anchorage Assembly. At the time of this writing, 1 public comment was received in support of establishing a fenced and gated dog area. And with that being said, the department recommends approval of the master plan for the Valley of the Moon Park, subject to the 2 conditions located on page 7 of the staff report, which is verifying with traffic engineer required spaces and including language to accommodate disabled persons. Thank you.
I have a question. Go to your department recommendation. You see that in bold? Read the line below that.
Through the chair, I made the correction. That's why I verbally said the The department recommends approval of the Valley of the Moon Park, subject to items 1 and 2. There is a typo there.
I have a second question. Comment 2, verify with the traffic engineer that the required parking spaces are provided on site. Was the traffic engineer asked to comment on this?
Oh, they were, and they provided comments.
What were their comments? What page?
It is page 15 of the staff packet, and the traffic engineer has no conceptual objections. At all locations where portable toilets are provided within the Valley of the Moon Park, the MOA shall require at least one accessible portable toilet. Please include specific language to ensure that the accommodations are made for parking, restrooms, and trail use. And the ADA guidelines must be adhered for all projects.
Do those strike you as traffic comments?
Do they? Can you restate your question?
Do those comments strike you as traffic comments?
Well, they came from the traffic engineer. It could be said that they're a little more construed towards the non-transportation coordinator or transportation planning.
I mean, where did comment 2 come from on the department recommendations?
That just came from, through the chair, that came through the, they're going to be extending the parking. They're going to be, they don't have a set number yet for their, for the community garden. So we're not sure how many spaces will be required. In the new Title 21 there is a, for community gardens, there is a one per 5,000 square feet of lot area. And the plan doesn't state how large the community garden is going to be, so that's going to generate some parking spaces. So that's why we made the recommendation that it should be, the required parking spaces will be provided.
Okay, thank you. That's a better explanation than I was coming up with. Thank you very much. Anyone have any further questions for staff? Okay. The applicant here to make presentation. Please come forward. State your name.
My name is Steve Rafuse, R-A-F-U-S-E, and I'm a park planner with Municipality of Anchorage Parks and Recreation. So for over 50 years, Valley of the Moon Park has been one of the most popular and beloved parks in the city of Anchorage. And much as the city of Anchorage has evolved, so too has the park. And the master plan, which is before you, is the latest iteration of that evolution. It's a 5 to 10 year vision for development and management of the park. It identifies community needs, addresses issues and concerns, and also establishes a framework for development. So in 2010, Parks and Recreation invested $500,000 in Valley of the Moon Park. We improved ADA access, upgraded playground equipment, and installed a new playground, or installed a new picnic shelter. And since then, the park's been as popular as ever, and that popularity has created new challenges for the Parks and Recreation Department. So going into this planning, we first wanted to address several issues, the first of which was concerns over safety and overflow parking onto 17th Avenue, and then also to provide a formal direction for the Little League field, which in recent years has been more of an off-leash dog park. So with any planning effort, we wanted to determine appropriate and compatible uses, and we also wanted to provide for a park that encourages positive and active community use and discourages negative and illegal activity. So as the planning staff pointed out, we presented to 2 community councils, the South Addition and North Star Community Council, where we recruited members to participate on the advisory group, as well as neighbors of the park and the likes of Laney Fleischer. We had 4 meetings with the advisory group over 8 months last year, and we also had an intern who was a graduate student in landscape architecture who joined us last summer and had gone out to the park and done a parking study. So over the course of 20 days, rainy days, sunny days, evenings, weekends, had gone out and made observations about how people are using the park and also how are they using the parking lot and how are they parking along 17th Avenue. So we presented 4 site plan alternatives to the advisory group, mostly just to solicit input and feedback. We took that input and feedback, revised that into a preferred alternative, and that's the plan that you can see in front of you here tonight. We took that plan to the community councils, received resolution, to the Parks and Recreation Commission in January, received unanimous support, and then we also have a resolution and letter of support supporting the designation of an off-leash area by the Animal Control Advisory Board. So I think everybody's pretty familiar with the general bones of Valley of the Moon Park, and I just want to provide a little bit more depth about the recommendations that this plan moves forward. So one thing we heard through the process, and one thing we noticed through the parking study is a lot of folks actually are just parking on 17th Avenue and cutting right through the woods just to access the playground, as opposed to walking the 50 yards from the parking lot. Now, the way that the playground is situated at Valley of the Moon Park, it's located relatively close to 17th Avenue, and so we wanted to provide and expand the fencing along 17th Avenue, one, to discourage people from shortcutting, but also to improve safety. Children typically don't know where the playground ends and where the street begins. We also wanted to move the restroom screen, which was installed in 2010. We have a decorative 3-sided screen that basically encloses the porta potties. However, they're located away from the parking lot. It's incredibly difficult for the company to actually go and service the porta potties, so now the porta potties are located by the parking lot. We want to move that screening because people don't like to look at blue porta potties sitting in the middle of the park. We want to formally designate an off-leash dog space in the general location of the ball field, so it's roughly about 3/4 of an acre. At the beginning of the process, we contacted Anchorage West Little League to see if they had any intention of using the field in the future. They actually supported the recommendation of an off-leash dog park because they thought that that would provide more areas for folks to take their dogs in West Anchorage and also keep them from using the fields out at Lynn Airy for running their dogs. So with upgrading or designating an off-leash dog space, it would include upgrading fencing, providing dual entrances, ADA access, removing the dugouts, and providing amenities such as signage, trash cans, and mutt mitts so people can actually be good stewards and pick up after the dog. The recommendation is to also expand the parking lot to the east of its current location. That's the main parking lot, which has 41 parking spaces. And that recommendation is informed by the parking study we did this summer, also by anticipated demand for the new amenities going into the park, and then by the constraints of the site. And so, we could add 100 spaces. If you build it, they'll come, but that would really destroy the character of the whole park. And so we found a good balance with this 27 spaces recommendation. Also retaining the open space within the park. So with the addition of the off-leash dog area, there's conversation of how big it should be, and we basically came to consensus of retaining the space of the ball field and retaining open space because that provides a great amenity to folks for unstructured activities. Preserving the forest as a natural buffer, particularly from traffic on C Street, so there's a lot of noise, and there's also a visual buffer, and there's also private properties directly to the east of the park along C Street, which have the potential to be developed in the future. Adding an adult fitness area just to the west of the playground. That way, families can go to the park, adults can work out, and still keep one eye on the kids in the playground. And in terms of sort of how that fits into the larger park system, there's fitness equipment down at Westchester Lagoon, which is quite popular, so that you can turn it into a whole circuit workout, run a mile workout. Maintain the current alignment of the bike trail, particularly the connection from Chester Creek to E Street. So we actually have funding this summer with the approval of the bonds. Basically, folks have voted, residents have voted for the bonds. We have funding as we're going to resurface Chester Creek, so we'll resurface that particular connection, which will go along perfectly because just last week they had striped the road for bike lanes and for share rows. And that's actually Arctic, 17th and East Street. We'll add bike racks, so if we want to encourage more folks to use multimodal transportation to get to the park, obviously adding amenities such as bike racks, and then expanding the C Street community gardens. And the number we sort of arrived to with the advisory group is upwards to about a 50% expansion. So this is our most popular community gardens. We have a wait list of more than we can accommodate, and so we want to be mindful when funding is secured to go back and work with community neighbors so that we can protect the buffer that sits between where the community garden expansion will be and the neighbors on Aurora and 19th. So just to reiterate here, it's a 5 to 10 year vision for development and management of the park. It addresses concerns over safety and parking. It provides a formal direction for the off-leash dog area, identifies community needs and desired improvements. It determines appropriate compatible uses and encourages active community use. And at this time, I'd just like to open up for questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
Thanks for your presentation. A couple questions. It struck me when you started talking about the adult fitness facility at Westchester in the context of how this park, will sort of build on that. And is there anything other than the larger park plan that sort of, in a way connects all of these greenbelt parks along the way and sort of sees somewhat of a master vision for what they either can be collectively or independently? Do you follow me? I mean, the next one down, the gorilla park, there's not much there. There's a couple of gorillas.
Right.
That's
right.
it. And you're getting into some poor neighborhoods, and so just kind of how they all connect is something that would be of interest to me. I know we're just looking at this plan, but I appreciated the comment of the connection between the two parks. Maybe more of a comment, but if you have a thought on that, I'd take it.
Yeah, just to answer that, I think that some of the work that Live, Work, Play is doing in terms of the Trails Initiative as well, I think they're taking really a comprehensive view at the trail system and incorporating wayfinding. And so I think that visioning and that leadership is really starting to come out.
Great. My other comment is, I go there both to go see the rocket with my kids, and I use it riding my bike or skiing myself through there and trying to get and so it's both a destination and sort of a throughput, if you will. And it strikes me that one of the bigger issues that I didn't really see fleshed out is the desire of people that are just trying to get through versus, a lot of families that are cooking and they're kind of going down to the creek and going back and forth, kind of wandering. Was there any discussion on how to, in a way, create either through signage or through additional pathways off the main path for kids that are riding little bikes versus kind of the conflicts with commuters or skiers or anything? That an issue that ever came up?
Well, I think and that's a good question, and we talked about that, and I think Valley of the Moon's almost a victim of its own success. It's one of the most popular parks in the city, and, I think, the best way to sort of manage that is, I think, through outreach, so people have a general sense of awareness that, hey, there are children in this area. And I think as you are traveling along, for example, Chester Creek, you should have some awareness that you are coming upon a park, particularly as you come out of a tunnel, you see 100 kids out there.
Right.
And so I think really education is probably the best way to find that balance.
No, thanks. Good presentation. I like the plan, and I just say I also appreciate the capacity that the Parks Department has built internally through these processes. It's well noted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spring?
Yeah, I like the plan too, and I was going to say that, damn it, Tyler, that I think it's great that the Parks Department has the capacity to do their own planning and get involved in that. It's great. I wonder, though, is the fence really necessary? Why don't you put up no parking signs there? Wouldn't that solve the problem instead of I'm not sure the fence, I can't visualize the fence. I don't see any fence, but is that going to make it prettier, or is it just going to be a barrier? Now, that alleyway that comes down there off the hill, there's I know some really good runners that use that almost every week. That's me, by the way, yeah. And come down that hill and cut across the park and hit the trail there. It's kind of I don't know if it's a natural or a lot of neighborhood people use it, but, there's probably a few anyway. And so a barrier there, is it really necessary, and are there alternatives there?
I don't think it's a deal breaker, right? So it's part of the larger conversation, and it actually started with as you round the bend of Arctic Boulevard, as it becomes, and it goes to, I guess, what is that, the northeast, and turns into 17th Avenue. What you have there is you have some pretty hideous chain link fence that kind of ends, and then there's one little section where there's a gap between the trees where there's one stretch of fence. So I guess the general idea is to complete that. So make it a fence, make it aesthetic and decorative fence. And again, the whole idea behind that is to improve safety.
I understand, and I think it's a good idea to get the traffic off the street because of the bike lanes. I mean, I'm not even sure how they're really anticipate the parking is going to really impact the flow of bicycles, and they should be eliminated for sure. But I don't know. I guess just a suggestion, maybe look at alternatives.
Thank you.
Commissioner Strike?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. Really appreciate the work you've done on this, and I have to say, I've used this park for 50 years. But I will tell you that I can't get my wife to go down between the areas between Gamble and this area because of the perceived safety issues. And we talk about the woods, and we talk about the wooded area in there, and we have met homeless folks living in these woods right here. That's a problem. And I read through here that we want to keep this wooded and keep it as a wooded barrier to C Street. My gut says you need to thin it out. You need to make it more open and visible. Yes, keep a small buffer in there between that, but there's a group that don't use it on that bicycle path here unless it's a function, unless there's a race, or unless there's a cross-country skiing with a group. But there's a perception of safety concerns along this area.
Yep, through the chair. And that's a great observation, and this has actually been a struggle for our department and a big point of conversation with the group. And I think in working with the advisory group, pretty much everybody recognizes the issues that are there. Some folks even point out, oh, it's not on the park property, it's on the other properties just beyond. And I commute to work. I go this way every day, twice a day, so I see those issues. I also live just about a half mile down. I see that in my own backyard as well. And it's a challenge for our department. We are the ones who manage the land. We're in charge of maintaining the land, but we have very little authority in terms of going in and going into those camps and removing them. So there's a process that's established for that, and I just think that that's going to be a challenge for the time to come. One thing we can do is, and we did talk about in putting the language to the plan, is that we talked about not removing trees, but that there could be removal of brush for maintenance and to improve safety. And so I think we wanted to not bind ourselves too much to preserving that character, particularly if it has to do with a safety issue.
Well, I see some of the ideas here, though, for dog parks was, there are no trees. There are no treed areas. Yet you've got some areas here that could be thinned out and utilized that would maybe remove part of the element that is of concern.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You done, Mr. Strike? Ms. Barker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm taking off a little bit on Commissioner Robinson's comments. I think it's a great plan. I think it could be strengthened by addressing the notion of the connectivity of the through traffic that goes on the trail system. Mm-hmm. And perhaps just a very simple recommendation, again, also as a frequent trail user in this section, is maybe some signage as you're entering into this park zone, so that those of us that are riding road bikes, for instance, and going a whole lot faster than little kids with training wheels would at least be cautioned to remember that that's what we're coming up on, and to keep this as a safe play area for children.
Okay, great observation. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple. Chester Creek flows through this park. Chester Creek has a habit of flooding and causing issues with adjacent houses. Yet there's no mention in this master plan of that issue.
Okay, so in terms of Chester Creek flooding and doing damage to residents, and those residents are all on the south side of the creek, and I would argue that their properties, their private properties, are outside of the boundary of what can be incorporated into this park master plan. However, we do touch upon in the plan the value of riparian areas, the value of stream bank restoration, and providing limited access to the creek. So in terms of what we can manage as within the park here, those recommendations are made, and we've actually been actively doing that in the last several years with youth employment in parks.
Okay. But I mean, the creek is on your property.
Correct.
The maintenance of that creek, therefore, is yours.
I might argue that might be a multi-jurisdictional, but I can't speak to.
Your property.
It is on our property. That's true.
So it's just like a tree or anything else. I do think that the neighbors are owed, an analysis of what's going on there, and a plan to work towards resolving it. If your house was flooding annually, you'd want somebody to do something about it. Okay, and so I think that one hole in this program is good neighborship with your people, and that you've got creek issues there. I'm not saying you caused them, but your creek is flooding in those houses, and it should be addressed.
Hello.
I wasn't going to butt in, but I need to.
Do it.
Good evening. My name is Holly Spoth Torres, and I'm the park superintendent. I just want to talk a little bit about the way Public Works manages our streets and drainage versus Parks and Recreation, we manage property. So you're absolutely right. The creek runs through our property. It's going to provide a drainage area for when the creek floods. When we talk about solving flooding problems or actually maintaining that drainage, it falls under streets and Public Works. And Public Works, through project management and engineering, currently has a project out to help solve the flooding problem. So they're working on that right now.
Okay, that's a good answer. I think it should be part of your plan.
That's true. And what you don't see behind the scenes is Parks and Public Works duking it out over funding. So you'll see that we did this master plan in-house with operational dollars. And so Public Works actually acquires the funds to do those larger capital projects to solve the flooding and drainage problems. So that money will flow into their capital budget, whereas smaller dollars will flow into our capital.
Okay, but it's part of your, anyway, it's just,
I know.
It should be addressed in the plan. That's what I'm saying. It's an operational issue,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been around for when Greg started playing in the park. I think he caused the initial flood.
I know.
On that one.
I just wanted you to be aware that we weren't actually ignoring it, that, it's being addressed.
I hear you and I accept what you're saying, but if I read the plan, I don't see it. That's my point. We want a plan that addresses all the issues, not just the ones that are fun.
And I think you're going to hear some public testimony that matches exactly what you said, and I think we'd be happy to do that.
Okay. On thinning trees, I live on Potter Marsh, so I have a lot of trees. You can remove about a third of your trees, and it will look a lot better, and nobody will know they're gone. And so I encourage you to remove some trees, because we just let everything grow and grow and grow, and pretty soon you can't walk through it. Your testimony was that you had talked to the Little League, and they're happy with losing the ball field.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to get phone calls at 2 a.m. in the morning about losing a ball field.
I've got an email printed out if you'd like to see it.
I can just see this coming, that we got the dog people happy, and that takes care of a couple commissioners. But I don't want the Little Leaguers after me next. I would not encourage lighting the trail. I think we've got enough lighting. People use headlights. We've got night sky desires and stuff like that. And lighting a trail has maintenance issues and energy use on that. If you decide you have to, 3-foot height standards with lights every 10 feet are preferred over lights every 30 feet in the air. It's just visual issues there. I think that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You've got 2.5 minutes of rebuttal on that. We'll open the public testimony, public hearing, then we'll come back to you, sir.
Thank you.
I now open the public hearing on case 2015-0004, approval of the 2015 Master Plan Valley of the Moon Park. If you wish to testify, please come forward, state your name. There's a timer up here. There's a timer up here. It will go yellow when you have 30 seconds left or 1 minute. When you have 1 minute, it goes yellow on that. Please state your name.
Kevin Degler, Degler.
Yeah, I'm a regular user of the Valley of the Moon Park. I take my dog there, I walk there, I chase fish in the creek there. I endorse, I'm here to speak for the dog park. I'd like to touch on a couple things. The parking, he wants to move the parking area to the east. It's going to wipe out a beautiful little spruce grove. I'm with Mr. Strike. We need to do something about these guys living in the woods over there. I propose maybe a parking area over off of C Street, some kind of a winding pathway through where these guys are living, because you are, and I encourage all of you to walk through those woods. It's scary. You could cover this whole desk with the garbage and crap that's back there. It's disgusting. As far as the barrier along 15th between the rocket ship and the street, it's actually a kind of a natural drop off there and fairly heavy brush, and I don't really see a problem there. Why spend the money that when we could use the money to further improve the rest of the park? Speaking on the ball field section of this thing, I'm a ball player. I grew up playing ball, haven't played for years. But when I take my dog to the dog park and there's somebody's having a company picnic and they all decide to go have a ball game, that's a beautiful part of Anchorage. It's great to have a little place where you can have a ball game. So I don't know if we could put leave it an informal ballpark or maybe help a couple of groups there, because people do use it rarely, but they do, and it always brings a smile to my face. You know, I walked my dog along the creek that day. It's not a big deal. And I'd just like to finish up by saying it's really good to be able to offer my opinion at these meetings, and I thank you for all you guys do. I know it's a lot of hours and a lot of work, and I thank you.
We got some questions. Commissioner Spring?
Yeah, I guess I agree with you. I think sometimes it's nice, especially when you're barbecuing, if you have a company picnic or something, to have a little softball game or something. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I guess they still do that, don't they?
Yeah. Just a couple
but
weeks ago.
it's a little league field, though, isn't it? So is it really usable for softball?
Oh, there's pit holes and rocks, and it's a mess, but you still get out there and knock the ball around, and people are yelling and screaming and throwing the ball over the
But
fence.
if you get adults playing softball there, it's way too small, right? You can't.
They were
play.
adults. The Target, just 2 weeks ago, Target had their company picnic there, and they had a heck of a game going, and we all just stood outside the fence and watched the game. I mean, and it's too small, but it's an informal thing. It's like a park. I mean, it's not a league. It's just people getting a catch-up game going.
Kevin, I got a question for you. How do we handle the dog waste?
I think our group does a pretty good job in that park right there. I mean, we do police it ourselves. We encourage other people to do it. It'd be nice to have some more disposal sites closer to the park, because people tend to not want to gather their poop up and carry it all the way to the nearest garbage can, which is quite a ways away, especially if they came from a different direction. They tend to just leave it laying along the fence. That is a good issue and a good point, and I think it needs to be addressed.
I mean, 80% of the people do an excellent job picking it up, but the other 20%,
Yeah.
you know.
And I see that. And I've also, and other people in the little group that we've got here, is we've taken our buckets there and our shovels there, and we cleaned it up because we're walking and playing there too, and we like to get down on the ground with our dogs. And
I mean, it takes it on that. Okay, I have no other questions in the queue. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you all.
Next person.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Shipley. I'm representing the Anchorage Waterways Council this evening with my remarks. If you don't know about us, we've been around Anchorage for about 35 years. We're a nonprofit group of concerned citizens that were interested in the creeks, wetlands, and associated riparian areas. One of the annual things we sponsor is the creek cleanup in the city, by the way. My comments are a specific part of the plan, not the entire plan, and that is the creek with the park. Since the Chester Creek is about the entire south boundary of the park, we think it has a fairly significant part of the park experience. And in fact, on page 5 of the master plan packet, the draft plan itself, under natural areas, it states that they call for rehabilitating riparian areas along Chester Creek and provide access to Chester Creek at select locations to minimize stream bank erosion. And that's good, but it doesn't go into a whole lot of detail. So I would just like to expand that a little bit for your visualization. this stabilization should be for the long term, even though this is a 5 to 10 year plan. Creeks are going to have been there a long time, and they're going to be there a long time. But creeks, as you know, constantly are working. Moving water, the faster it moves, the deeper it is, the more work it can do. And that includes, you start out with a straight creek, and in 50 or 100 years, it's starting to meander and more. On the outside of those curves, starts cutting, and pretty soon you have undercut banks. But plants and brush along the banks, growing, the root systems help stabilize the banks naturally. But as opposed to a bank that doesn't have any riparian brush or tree life with the root system. Kids like water and kids like parks. And so that being a very popular park with lots of families and kids, as has been expressed, they love to get down to the creek. And in doing so, by the thousands every week, or however many they are, you have a lot of trampling of the bank, because that's how you get to the water. Pretty soon the roots are trampled underneath, and the soil's compacted, and the bushes start dying. And then the trees start dying because the roots aren't doing their job. And eventually things fall over, big windstorms, the trees blow down, the bushes die. And the water starts working on those barren banks where the kids were, and it starts eating away and undercut, and part of the bank collapses into the water, and the creek gets wider. And in 50 or 100 years, that Chester Creek at that location, under those circumstances, could be eating its way all the way up to where this newly installed kids' playground is. So the concern is keeping the creek stable. And keeping the riparian area stable is a big part of that. We don't want to see riprap. Back in the old day when you were a dumb engineer, you'd haul in waste rock. Smart engineers too. Waste concrete, big things. Just pile it against that bank that was eroding, and it would cut down the erosion from the water. But it was ugly, it wasn't good fish habitat, and there was a lot of negatives. That's not done, it's not desired anymore by Fish and Game people, by DNR people. So, just for your visualization, one of the good new ways is taking root wads, which are just large root of like a big dead spruce tree, and leaving maybe 6 or 8 or 10 feet of the lower stem, you call it, a trunk, and they shove the trunk into the bank where the cutting is going on, with the roots sticking out right about water level. Then they backfill with soil up to the water line. Then they'll plant willow cuttings in there because they root really fast to get your bushes. In a few years, you've got all these nice willow bushes with roots going down, and to stabilize the bank, the root wads are slowing down the erosion of the water. And it's all natural, and there's fish habitat for the little young fish that are growing in there, little salmon and so forth. So, but all that costs money. It's the right way to do it, but it's going to have to be in a budget.
Okay. Can you
So,
finish your presentation?
I will. I'll wind up. So I'd like to see that addressed. Across on the other side of the creek, on the bank next to the houses that have been referred to, is an aesthetic problem. You're in the nice park and you look across the creek and there's encroachment by fences, trash, stacks of firewood, lawn cuttings, tree branches, and that's a code enforcement issue, and it's an aesthetic issue as part of the park experience, and maybe putting that in the plan to have the code inspector come by once a year might help things out. Anyway, that's all I have.
I have no questions. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Shipley.
Hi, I'm Laura Green, and I am a property owner on Aurora Drive. My own family home is there, as well as an income property that we own down the road, which is essentially 19th turns into Aurora. And while in general, I really like this master plan, and there's several points that I'm here to support: the official dog park, the removal of the dugouts, which have essentially become de facto toilets. I think those are great. Dealing with the parking issue, I support that. I support the fence along 17th because having a 3- and 5-year-old that like to kind of get down into those woods, it gets a little bit close to that sort of well-traveled street. So I actually support the fence in that area. Relocating the porta potty screen so that that's a bit more visually appealing. The bike rack. Those are all things I like. I think there's some improvements that could be made. One issue I have is the use of the wooded area from 17th to 19th along C Street and the homeless camps there, as well as the homeless camps that butt up against the C Street Community Gardens. And the recent stabbing, I think last night or the night before, is in that area. So it is a public safety concern, and there's a lot of illegal transactions that occur in those woods. And some of the neighbors got together and hauled out a load of trash behind the C Street Gardens, and all it did was promoted more illegal campers to move into the area. So while I support the dog park, I have one, and I bring my own dog there, I should say, and I support keeping that. I was wondering if there might be something to do to use that wooded space more like how University Park is kind of a trail. I know it's not a huge space, but if there could be something done in there where you have people moving through that space, as opposed to the ball field has kind of somewhat become a mud pit, and maybe something could be done with seeding that so that wouldn't happen. But in general, I'd like to see somehow something move into that space that people are drawn to. So, and I think a dog sort of trail might be something that people are already in that area using, down there with their dogs, and might be inclined to go and use. And so I think traffic in that area would help prevent illegal campers from sort of taking root there. The other comment I have is about optimizing the shape of the garden expansion to kind of optimize the buffer. As somebody that owns property on Aurora Drive, I want as much kind of woods between me and the parking and the gardens. So maybe if that's more of an L shape as opposed to the square that's shown in the map. And I'm concerned, I've never seen lots of cars in that parking lot, and I'm in and out of that area all the time because I come down on 19th to get to my house. But if there, I'd be interested to know if there's really a need for expanded parking, because it seems like there's only 2 or 3 cars ever there at one time. I think unlike the park that everybody goes to in the sunshine at the same time on a Saturday, there seems to be a different kind of use of that. And the only other thing I would say is that the receptacles for trash, they're the open top type, and so there's a lot of seagulls in the area, and also I think the illegal campers, there tends to be, even when people manage to get their trash into them, birds seem to come through and take it out. So some better sort of tamper-proof receptacles, and as well as more receptacles, because after a heavy use day, there's just trash kind of stacked up next to the receptacles that are there. And also, I don't really support continuing barbecuing in that area, because I think people tend to leave their hot coals around, and I find my dog with chicken bones and things like that. I think there's some hygiene issues with that. But if we are going to continue to allow barbecues,
Could you please wrap up?
Yep, if we're going to continue to allow barbecues, at least some hot coal receptacles so that those things aren't on the ground.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Seeing and hearing none, thank you for your testimony.
Hello, my name is Penny Burt, B-U-R-T, and first of all, I'd like to express my appreciation to the Commission for considering the park master plan. I'm a dog parent, and I use the dog park, or what we have used for the dog park, all the time. And there are many of us for whom our dogs are our family, and some of us, like me, are only family. I've recently become partially disabled, and I cannot use the trail system anymore. So this park is very important to me because I can bring my dog here, and they can run and play, and I don't have to walk a lot, and that's really important to me. And also the parking places close to the dog park are very important to me as well. I was on the advisory group for the park, and a lot of these things came up at the time, and they're included in the master plan. I really appreciate a safe, fenced dog park where my dogs can go and play. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Anyone else?
Oh, yes.
If you come on, you can come down here and get in line. It saves us time on that.
Hi, I'm Dee Lynn Chambers, Chambers, and like somebody over here I couldn't quite see, I've been enjoying this park for 50 years also. That sounded like such a long time, and then I realized, so me too. Anyway, I take my dogs there. A bunch of us, we see the same people over and over. It's a wonderful place, and I think you can probably use your imagination, and you're all tired, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but I appreciate all the work everybody's done and all of you listening this evening, and I really would like to see it pass.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, please.
Good evening. My name is Vivian Mash, and I'm a local user of Valley of the Moon Park, and my mom and I, Christine, sorry, I'm a little short.
Would you please spell your name?
Vivian, first name, and last name is Mash, M-A-S-H.
Thank you, Vivian.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
And we're a constant user of Valley of the Moon Park. My mom and I, Christine, we use the park very, very often, and I think that we believe that this master plan is a great plan, and especially the dog fenced area is a safety concern for us, and having it fenced in an official dog park would be fabulous. Along with that, that struck my mind was the street lights. We don't have very much lighting, especially in the wintertime when it gets dark. I think that's a safety concern. I would highly suggest considering that. Especially the lighted areas and the trails is also a safety concern. Having that lit up would be, being a female and bringing 3 5-pound dogs is, I think you understand what I'm saying, but I think that's a concern. So I do definitely appreciate your time and the board for considering this. Thank you.
Whoa, Ms. Mash, stay, please. Commissioner Spring?
Through the chair, just a quick question. Where's the nearest dog park other than this proposed one? Is there
Arctic
one?
Benson.
Where?
Arctic Benson, sir.
Oh, Arctic Benson. Oh, they just put one in there in that park.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
South
So that's
Anchorage?
pretty far away.
Isn't there a dog park at South Anchorage? No,
Yes.
no, yeah, we did.
There is, no, the closest one I meant. Then
Is it
there's one on
Arctic?
Arctic. Yeah, I remember
Yes.
now. Yeah, right. That's not that far away, but it's
pretty far away, sir.
It's far enough, too far to walk anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir. I'm interrupting. I'm her mother, Christine. We were talking about Arctic Benson. Yes, it's a dog park.
Ma'am, would you give me your name?
Christine.
Christine Mash?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify about Arctic Benson. We used to bring our little ones there, but because of the homeless issues there, safety concern because we are ladies and I had been stopped by people. I don't feel safe there at all. The other concern was, what was that? Families, when they're playing with, at the playground there was one time they had fireworks there. That triggered the dogs around the park. I have picked up broken glasses, needles from Arctic Benson, and I have stopped using that park. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. That's why we turned to Valley of the Moon Park, where we have a number of friends we know, and we feel safe there too, to bring the little ones, because mine are all 4-pounder dogs.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Sorry.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are you finished, ma'am?
Yes, I am, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mom, cut it on you.
Hi, my name is Anna Bryant, Bryant. I was on the advisory committee as well. I'm part of the South Addition Community Council, and I'm a South Addition resident. I've been going to this park, when we used to call it the Rocket Park, so since I was a kid, but now I can walk there, bike there, and take my 3 dogs there. So I'd like to address some of the questions that you've had, but also to tell you that about the ball field, it hasn't been actively maintained as a Little League field for over 7 years. That was the last time I heard. So as people said, there are holes in the park. The ground isn't really good, but it's the fence also has not been maintained, and neither have the dugouts. Now, I'm part of a group of people that we call ourselves little dog meetup, and we meet there every Saturday and Sunday morning. And some of the ladies that spoke also go to that. We clean up the park every time we come, and we plan to continue that every week. And because, as you stated, there are dog users, that small percent that make it bad for everyone. But we also pick up the trash, the human feces, the used condoms, the needles that are in the dugout, which are used as a shelter in the wintertime because there is very little shelter around there for some of our homeless people. So we look forward to those dugouts being taken out first and foremost when the park plan is approved. But we spoke very much in the advisory committee about the potential of taking out some of those trees and keeping that ball field and maybe using some of the parkland to move into there. There were several very vocal people against that on the committee, which is why we chose to do the way that we did. We didn't want to lose trees, and I commute to UAA from South Addition on that trail. There are parts I don't like to go through either, just as you have said. But that really is more of a city problem than it is a park problem, I believe, as well. So.
I have no questions in the queue. Thank you for your
Okay,
testimony.
thanks.
Anyone else care to testify? Anyone else at all? I lost a name. The applicant, you've got 2 minutes rebuttal. If you choose to use it, you don't have to.
Okay, so I'll just use maybe 1 minute to answer some of the questions and then go to the questions here. So just to address the stream bank stabilization. So we have been working with Youth Employment and Parks over the last several years to basically rehabilitate and restore and replant along Chester Creek there. We've also designated 2 access points to the creek. And then we've been working with our invasive species coordinator to remove invasive species along the stream. So we have been actively trying to rehabilitate that area and have been following the recommendations of the Chester Creek Watershed Plan, which was put together by the Watershed Council. So we look forward to continuing to work with them to basically make the creek as healthy as possible in that area. In terms of other things, I think that, some of the things that we will add when we start improvements to the park is we will make sure we'll add some coal bins at the shelters, and then we'll also make sure that we do add amenities that will make it as easy as possible for folks using the off-leash dog area to make sure that they can clean up after their pets and that we make it as easy for them as possible. And so I guess now I'll just open it up to additional questions from the commission.
Hey, I've got bad news for Holly. During testimony on the park, our timer died, so we're going to look to your budget to replace our timer up here. I want to make that perfectly clear. It just died up here. That's what's causing on that one. Mr. Kanes, then Mr. Strike.
Thank you. I think this is a good job with this plan, and want to echo a lot of the other commissioners. I've been going to this park since I was a kid. I was a little disappointed in this plan, and I would heavily emphasize the tree removal and possibly thinning it out, because the illegal camps in this area particularly are concerning, and safety along this whole green belt is a concern of mine. So when I read your recommendations on page 5 to preserve existing natural areas, tree removal and brush clearing should be limited to necessary maintenance and safety improvements. I would prefer to see at least some thinning. That would give people that use the park a bit better sight. And I think for the removal of the camps, I think it would be easier if it wasn't so heavily wooded, because right now, as you all know, you can't even see 5 feet into those woods. So that's my only comment on page 5.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Strike?
Yes, and I'm going to echo Mr. Kane's remarks. And the one area that I would like to see in the master plan is a section addressing safety, so that the area of the wooded area, the homeless, so forth, could be addressed. I think it is appropriate to address it here. I disagree with the last woman who spoke that, that's a city problem. Well, the city has come back to private owners and said, thin out your lots. thin out your woods. And that was a move by the city, and they came out to a number of businesses in Midtown and directed them about 4 or 5, 6 years ago. And we were required to thin out the lots for that reason. Yet here's the city is, you've got an attractive nuisance and you've got a homeless problem. We've heard it from 4 testimonies. I'd love to see that addressed here and be proactive on that regard. Thank you.
No other questions or comment. My only part is the drainage issues with Chester Creek. It's in the park. It's part of the park. I think it belongs as part of the master plan. We can't just address the fun stuff. We've got to also address it. Even if it is another department, I understand that, but just promise the heck out of their performance in your master plan. It was approved by planning and zoning, so that's what you got to do, I mean, on that one. I hereby close the public hearing on case 2015-004. I have a motion by Mr. Strike. Mr. Strike.
Yes, in the matter of 2015-0004 on the approval of the 2015 master plan for the Valley of the Moon Park, I move for recommendation of the master plan with the additional comments that have been added by the department, their recommendations number 1 and 2. But I would actually propose a third recommendation as part of my motion, and that motion to include a new section within the master plan dealing with safety. And in that, my desire, my goal for that section would be an area that they could then address the tree issues, the homeless issues, and other areas, but to see that it is a section that is being addressed and not being passed over.
I have a second by Mr. Kange. Mr. Strike, do you care to say anything else in support of your motion? Mr. Kange, do you care to say anything?
Can't say anything that's already been said.
All right, thank you very much. It's getting late. Do we have any other testimony, any other comments on that motion? Any other comments at all? Seeing none, please use your machines. Mr. Strike, Mr. Kange, do either of you have any findings? I would like to add 2 findings, that it was nice to see that the Parks Department had done a good job with their committee. Obviously, there was effort to comply with both sides, and we appreciate that. And we also note that we recommend that they work on the drainage issue with that. Mr. Strike.
I'm going to echo the chairman, and thank you for the presenter. Very clean, clear, succinct. Appreciate your work on that. Thank you.
Okay. Next case, case 2015-0042, the Community Development Department, an ordinance amending Title 21, new code, Section 2105050I, to including 2114-040, to include small boat sales and repair and vehicle sales and repair uses, and to address various other needed corrections. Do we have Mr. Robinson?
As Holly walks out, I just wanted to say thanks for your years of service. She is retiring as a municipal park planner, but supposedly sticking around, right?
Yeah. My last day is Monday.
All right. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Holly. Erica, it's 10 o'clock. It's us again.
Guess it's just you all and me. So I'll try to be brief. I'm sure you all read your staff report very closely. This ordinance has 1 major issue and 4 minor issues. That's how I would characterize it. The major issue is the use of or how to characterize boat repair and boat sales. This was brought to our attention when Bass Pro Shops indicated they were interested in building a boat service center on Lot 14A of the Glen Square Frag Lot site plan, which you can see on page 21 of your staff packet. The Bass Pro shop is kind of in the lower left on Frag Lot 2A, and they desire to use Frag Lot 14A1, which is up to the upper right, for a boat repair facility. And we examined both the new code and the old code, and under the old code, they would have been able to do this as part of a vehicle storage yard meeting the self-storage or meeting the vehicle storage yard standards, which included a public hearing site plan review in the B3 district. So that was certainly their option, but we did look at how boat repair and storage was listed in the new code, and it was listed as part of a marine operations use, which was only permitted in the marine commercial and marine industrial districts. And considering that there are existing boat sales and boat repair facilities around town in the B3 district, we felt it was appropriate to make a change to allow your smaller boats, the boats that are more comparable to a size of a vehicle, your boats that can fit through a vehicle garage bay door, to allow those types of boats to be sold and repaired in B3 districts, similar to automobiles and trucks. So we felt it was a reasonable change to make. So that is a main change of this ordinance. You can see that we are amending vehicle parts and supplies, vehicle small sales and rental, vehicle large sales and rental, and vehicle service and repair. And on page 2 of your staff packet, you can see the zoning districts in which those uses are allowed and by what type of approval process they are allowed. I do want to point out that storage of of boats would still be considered an industrial use. And I'd like to clarify that we're talking about storage where the boats are not out on display for people to walk around and look at and shop and pick, oh, I want this one, oh, but let's see what's inside that one. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about where they may be shrink wrapped, they may be put into racks where they're not available to the customer. So that is still not a use. The pictures that I have on the third page, that is still not a use that would be proposed to be allowed in the B3 district. We also clarify the definition of the term vehicle to be the same, to be consistent within municipal code and be the same as in Title IX, which is something that is transported or drawn upon a street, like a automobile or a trailer, and thus we have a couple other minor changes throughout Title 21 where one could construe that the use of the word vehicle did include boats, and so we changed it to clarify that we were talking about, in those situations, vehicles and boats separately. So that's the kind of major issue in this ordinance. There are, as I mentioned, 4 minor issues. One relates to self-storage facilities, clarifying about where you can put your security wire, barbed razor, or concertina wire, that it has to be inverted inside the fence, but can be either below the top level of the fence with a sign, or above the top level of the fence, but by no more than 1 foot. And then another clarification, like I mentioned earlier, that boats can be stored in vehicle storage yards. Even though we call them vehicle storage yards, we clarify that you can put boats in them. Section 3, this relates to on-site pedestrian walkways. There is an exemption for industrial and utility facility uses in the I-1 and the I-2 districts to not have to provide on-site pedestrian walkways. There was a review of a project in the Marine Industrial District, and it was an industrial project in the Marine Industrial District, and staff noted that that exemption did not exist in the Marine Industrial, but it seemed reasonable. So we are changing this to say that utility and industrial uses in the marine, commercial, and marine industrial do not have to provide on-site pedestrian walkways. The fourth change is to the landscaping section. There's actually 2 minor changes. One states that when there is a conflict between required perimeter landscaping and site distance triangles, that, and I think you all understand what sight distance triangles are, right? They're the ability for vehicles exiting out onto a roadway, either from a driveway or another roadway, to be able to see oncoming traffic. And so we don't want buildings in those areas. We don't want a lot of vegetation, and so there can be conflicts between perimeter landscaping requirements and sight distance triangles, and this gives staff the authority to make administrative modifications to the landscaping requirements, such as reducing the required width. You know, if you have to space trees 10 feet apart, well, you can bunch your trees more together to avoid the sight distance triangle. It gives staff the ability to make administrative adjustments to those requirements. And then the second change just brings the text into consistency with the warranty table. There is a landscaping survival warranty that is required based on, and the amount is based on the lot area. You can see from the table on page 5 that the lot area starts at 10,000 square feet, but that exemption for lots smaller than 10,000 square feet was not listed in the exemptions in the text that is just above the table, so we added that in to make the table and the text consistent with each other. And then the last change in section 6 relates to bringing nonconforming characteristics of use towards compliance, and it just lists the various types of uses which have to move towards compliance, and it appears that the type of use, community uses, was inadvertently omitted, so we are adding that back into that section. I will note that I made an error. We've moved from clear vision area, the phrase clear vision area, to sight distance triangle. I get them confused. I can never remember which is the old one and which is the new one, and I got it wrong in the ordinance. It turns out sight distance triangle is the phrasing we use today, so that needs to be amended on page 4, line 9 of the ordinance. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Dean, are you making a motion or did you have a question?
I was wanting to make a motion.
Okay.
If nobody else has any comments, okay. I'm good.
May I take Mr. Strike's motion, then come back to you?
Absolutely.
Mr. Strike.
Yeah, you can take my question through the chair, and this is a question to staff on. I understand the boat storage. I understand, and I've been to many bass shops across the country, and I know the need here for this. I get it. But one of the things that comes up with this is that we talk about the shrink wrapped. It's in the back. It's not open to the public, and it's a storage site. I get it. But what comes with boat sales and storage becomes used boat trade-in, and it becomes a much larger operation because they're taking used boats then in trade. These boats then get stored, repaired and stored, and then ultimately marketed. Does this proposal address that or leave that open or restrict that type of activity?
Through the chair, Mr. Strike, first of all, Bass Pro could store their inventory on the fragment lot 2A, where they have their large retail establishment. When they went through large retail establishment site plan review with you, they did not indicate any storage or display of any materials outside. So they could be storing if they amended their site plan, they could be storing their inventory on their site. This amendment doesn't really address new versus used at all. If they were to repair boats on tract 14 or lot 14A1 and then display them for sale, that would be allowed by this ordinance, because it does allow sales. If they were to repair a bunch of boats and then shrink wrap them and put them away for storage, that would not be allowed. Does that get to your question?
They can store for themselves, but they can't store for the public.
They can do storage on lot 2A if they amend their large retail establishment site plan.
Okay, thank you.
A little bit of procedure before we get to Ms. Dean. If that completes the staff report, we will now ask the applicant if they want to speak. Will the record show that there's nobody in the room but us kids? And so I open the public hearing. No one wants to testify? No one at all? Public hearing is now testified. What is the wish of the body? Ms. Dean.
I move to approve case 2015-0042 with all of the verbiage written by the city, with the one change on page 4 of the ordinance, line 9, to change clear vision area to sight vision triangle.
Sight distance triangle.
Sight distance triangle.
Okay. We have a second by Mr. Walker. Ms. Dean or Mr. Walker, do you care to speak to your motion? Seeing none, please use your machine. Motion carries unanimously. Before we adjourn, two more housekeeping items. On the 18th, I know Mr. Strike and Mr. Kanes are not going to be here. Anybody else not going to be here on the 18th? I see nobody taking. I'm assuming death and high water would be the only excuse for the rest of you not to show up. That's not an excuse. Number two, when staff asked if we're going to be here or if we're attending a district or the lunch and stuff like that, can we do a better job of replying? If I send out an email and I ask for a reply, I don't know if you didn't get the email or something like that. So if you get a request, would you please reply? Sometimes it's going to be, hey, I don't know on my schedule, and I'll accept that. But at least we know you have gotten the message then. And I don't have to do it 2 or 3 times. Ms. McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have a number of items which I will try to go through very quickly with your permission. We were unable to finalize the staff report for next week's Title 21 amendment, which is the one case that's on the agenda, so we will have that couriered to you probably on Wednesday of this week. The AMATS Technical Advisory Committee is meeting on Thursday afternoon, and this is when they will be considering the change of the Citizens Advisory Committee from the Planning and Zoning Commission to a newly constituted one, and they do have your resolution. On Thursday also is the director's lunch, and Kate Guyard, the OMB director, is planning to be there to speak with you about the 6-year fiscal plan, getting an earlier start, and communicating with the commission on that. Coming to you sometime in the next, I don't know, couple of days, maybe week or 2, will be some information on changes that will be happening to this building over the next 18 months. They are going to be starting construction. We will no longer be using the entry right here. We will be using an entry that is farther to the northwest. And at some point, they will be, I think in middle of June, they will be taking out these 2 little mini conference rooms here. They'll be splitting the public conference room in the center into 2 rooms, and so that'll be available to us for backroom resting or whatever. It's my plan to, as construction ramps up in this building, to move the director's lunches back to the permit center, which I think will be just easier from a avoiding construction standpoint until that is done. So as soon as the information is provided to me, I will be passing it on to you. I think there'll be maps and schedules and color-coded things that'll be fun to look at. And then the last thing I wanted to tell you about was the Board of Adjustment did hear the appeal of the South Addition GCI tower that you guys saw in, I don't remember at this point, maybe January, where the GCI wanted to put an antenna on top of an existing power pole. And the staff directed the commission to act separately on the conditional use and the waiver for a fall-down radius. The Board of Adjustment ruled that it was inappropriate for staff to have the commission act as the administrative official, but also that because the commission ruled positively on the conditional use, that the commission had voted to approve a smaller fall-down radius, despite the fact that your very next vote was to not approve a smaller fall-down radius. So I found it to be rather a mystifying conclusion by the Board of Adjustment, but that's what they did, and their recording is, I haven't checked to see if the recording is available on the municipal minutes page, but as soon as I have their findings, I will pass them along to you.
Would you please?
Yes, that is all I have. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, everyone. Now, everyone, I have a motion to adjourn by Mr. Walker, seconded by Mr. Strike. Any discussion?